right, let's get this meeting started. It is March 25th at 8:30 a.m. and we're going to go right to roll call, please.
Councilmember Bracco?
Here.
Councilmember Klein?
Here.
Councilmember Fugazzi?
Here.
Councilmember Hilton?
Here.
Councilmember Marks?
Here.
Councilmember Ramirez?
Here.
Mayor Boso?
Here.
Here.
Item 1.3, City Clerk's report on posting of agenda, please.
Thank you, Mayor. This agenda was posted on Monday, March 23rd at 1:54 p.m.
Okay, let's go right to Matt, and then at some point we're going to do a little introduction, and we're going to go right to public comment early. Reading that here?
We're going to do it down in a couple slides.
Okay, you got it. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining today. It's great to have you all here. Good to see the members of the public attending as well. This is the first of two meetings to work towards setting measurable, definable goals. The first step today is to look through our legislative agenda and our departmental work plan, and to do a little bit of work ahead of that, talking about how we work together. I will say one of the things that impresses me most about coming to Gilroy is how well the council works together. You sort of cross aisles and do a nice job collaborating and moving things through in a very amicable way, and that's not always the case, so it's a pleasure working with that. I look forward to this meeting. One of the major goals that I'm looking for is making sure that we're on the same page, especially focusing on the legislative agenda, and that the items and as they're described in the scope that we think that we're moving forward with those align with what the council thinks. I will do a little bit of a spoiler alert at the sort of towards the end of the legislative agenda conversation. I'll be asking you to check off your top 5 and your bottom 5 of those items. So as we're going through them, keep that in mind because you might want to start circling. Not ranking them 1 to 5, just putting an X in a box for 5 good ones and 5 on the lower end. And then we'll take a little break and tally those and have a conversation about them and see what it tells us. And with that, I want to take a moment and introduce somebody that I've worked with over my career that's going to facilitate for us today, and that's Dave Sykes. And I'll let Dave do the introductions of who he is and take it from here. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Matt, and thank you for having me here today. So let's begin. Just a little bit about me. I've worked in, hard to say, local government for 40 years. Spent 35 at the city of San Jose doing various roles, rising up from an entry-level position to being public works director, city engineer, director of planning, building, and code enforcement at one point, director of emergency services at one point, and was chief operating officer. And I retired in 2021 as the city manager of San Jose. Over the last 5 years, I've been doing this consulting stuff part-time. Working with a lot of cities in the county, in the state, and in other states, doing a lot of executive coaching, workshop facilitation, different sorts of things, just supporting local government. My role today is really to facilitate this conversation. I'm not here to tell you how to do things or what to do. It's not my role. I will, along the way, share perspectives, but just kind of take it as that, a perspective, not necessarily a rule for sure. I feel fortunate that I'm able to kind of work in places where I feel like and do work that I have a connection with. And so in this particular case, I have a connection with Matt. We've worked off and on over the years. And then I have a connection with Gilroy. I have 2 nieces and a nephew, and their families live here. And then my mom lives about a block over there. So I am in Gilroy all the time, going out to eat, shopping, going to doctors, all the things that a son does in retirement for his mother. So really enjoy being in this community. And as I said, I like to do work that I feel somehow connected to it, not just in the abstract. So thank you for having me. So I'm going to ask each council member to introduce themselves and maybe just let me know how long you've been on the council. I've met the mayor. We actually happened to meet by chance through a mutual friend in a restaurant in downtown Gilroy last year. So maybe just go that way.
Sure. Okay, I'll go first. Yeah, I'm Mayor Greg Bozo. I've been the mayor since December of 2024, so just over a year. Prior to that, I worked in landscape construction for many years, and my involvement in Gilroy was never political. It was just community. With my background.
Yeah.
Tom Klein. I've been on council since 23.
December of 22. And I'm also on a commercial glass company up in Fremont. And like the mayor, I'm very community-oriented and involved, and that's kind of my pathway to getting me to where I am today.
Right.
Good morning. Welcome.
Right,
Thanks
thank
for being here. Kelly Ramirez. I was elected in November 2024. Prior to that, I had just been retired for a couple of years. I have 17 years in education and 15 years in nonprofit management. Retired as the executive director of a YMCA. Involved Rotary president, Gilroy Garlic Festival, board of directors, just kind of wherever I can help out the community.
Hey, nice to meet you. I'm Zach Hilton, and let's see. I started off as like a bike and ped advocate when my daughter went to school at El Roble, and quickly got on the bike and ped commission here. Served that for 4 years, from 2017 to 2020, and then decided to run for election for a council seat, and I got that in 2020, and then ran for re-election in 2024. So this is my second term on the council.
Hello, I'm Carol Marks. Welcome. This is year 8 for me on the council. I was elected in 2019. And I'm a retired junior high teacher from Gilroy Unified.
Okay.
Terrence Fugazzi, and I was elected in November of 24. Over 30 years as a technology sales and or marketing executive with small business mostly. Currently started my own newest business about a year or so ago, and yeah, enjoying time on the council and everybody who's up here, and looking forward to doing more great things over the next few years.
Dion Bracco. I'm born and raised in Gilroy. I've been on the council for 21 years, and I own a local business in Gilroy, Hollister, Morgan Hill, towing company, and I'm kind of retired now, but my daughters run it. So that's who I am. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, everyone. And I guess I should have asked for the PowerPoint to be queued up. So as we go through this, I'll do some talking. Certainly if you have pressing questions as we're going through it, ask. But we do have points kind of in the process for you to really participate quite a bit. But I don't want you to feel like you have to hold and wait if you got something pressing you want to kind of ask about or talk about. Oh, I can't see. I thought I was going to see it there. Okay, good. So I may have to just. Okay, so Matt kind of mentioned this a little bit. So today we're going to be reviewing the council norms that you've already adopted, not in detail, but just kind of some highlights. We are going to be spending some detailed time on the legislative agenda and department work plans. And as Matt mentioned, making sure that we're on the same page about these things. Next week, we have a second session. We're going to build off the work that's done today and really about developing performance targets so that we can kind of measure success for all of us here. And so I always like to start with a little context on kind of why we do this work. This chart here I've used for years in just general discussions. It comes from the Institute for Local Government. If you Google it, it's changed over time, but I kind of use this old one because I think it's more simple and direct, and I like it. And so there's really 4 pieces to kind of what makes this whole process work well. The first one is unity of purpose. And this doesn't mean that we're all going to agree all the time on every issue. That's not what this means. But it does mean that, once the council makes decisions, that we kind of have our marching orders and we're supporting that direction and we're moving forward. I used to always tell my councils, when we're generally rowing in the same direction, we can do amazing things. And if we're all rowing in different directions, we're going to get nothing done. And so hopefully that's the kind of the theory here, is trying to kind of get behind what we're doing. And that's what we're going to be talking about today, getting on that same page about the work plan. Clear roles and responsibilities. When they're not clear roles and when things get blurry, things get really messy. And so understanding and valuing each other's roles. The council is policymaking. The administration is technical recommendations and getting work done. And the community is providing input to all of us so we know what they want. And so there's all those roles and responsibilities are tied into this. A positive governance culture, to me, what this means and what I've always taken it to mean is having a collaborative relationship with each other, not adversarial. We may not always agree on issues, of course not. And that's actually what, there's a strength in that diversity of thinking that comes forward. But really all of us focusing on problem solving to kind of get the work done. And then the last one is norms and protocols and policies. We're going to be talking, kind of highlighting some of the norms that you've already adopted later on today. How I look at all of this is as a partnership. We're all partners here in terms of doing the work. The mayor and the council, the administration, the community. This is the partnership. And if that partnership is done well, it creates an environment for success for all of us. It hopefully, through the work we're doing today and next week, it creates clear direction, policy directions in specific, but just clear direction on what the work plan is. And through clear direction, you can achieve great results. And that's really what we're hoping for. It also builds trust in the community. If the community sees that we have a plan and we're working toward it, they trust us more. And that trust also goes over to the business community who wants to invest in our city because they trust that we've got a plan and we're working toward it. And one for me that's always been super important is it also builds confidence in the workforce. The workforce sees that we have a plan. It allows us to retain talent and it allows us to attract talent because they see a well-functioning government and with a plan on how to get things done. So I think we were going to pause here for public comment just to provide input, and I'm going to throw it back to the mayor. Yeah.
I'll go to the city clerk to see if we have any public comment.
I have no speakers.
Okay, thank you.
All right, back to me. Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit about the norms that you adopted in 2022. I think the fact that you have norms is great. Often, when I'm starting to do work with the city or people like me are doing work with the city, we're spending a day or two kind of figuring out what the norms are. You guys are way ahead of often where I've kind of stepped in with the city, so that's great. Norms provide guidance along a variety of topics. And there's no doubt your norm document, I think, is in the packet. As I read through this, there's a lot of things in here. This could almost be broken into two separate documents, one of norms and one of kind of a handbook, if you will. But for now, it's great, and you guys can revisit that if you want down the road. I'll just say it's really good stuff in here. Matt and I had talked. He didn't feel the need to go line item by line item on this because you've had it for a while and you've been working through it. But we are going to highlight some items here. And I'd say the ones we're highlighting tend to be kind of the tricky ones based on, kind of my experience working with cities. And so that's really what our plan is today. But along the way, if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to ask. All right, so the first one we're highlighting is in Section 1, Meeting Guidelines, and Section 1.7, Robert's Rules of Order. Now, most people in government know what that is. Outside of government, they have no idea what it is. There's a lot to Robert's Rules of Order. Obviously, it's there to kind of provide structure for us to conduct meetings in particular in an effective way. What we thought would be helpful, just kind of go through how a meeting is conducted and kind of some of the key points and the value to them. So certainly when you are hearing council items, item comes forward, mayor introduces it. A big piece of that is a staff report and sometimes a staff presentation to provide context, to provide a basis for the recommendations that are being made. Next are questions that come from the council. And I think what in my experience, what I've seen a lot is sometimes that questions part that councils have when they're asking staff questions and they're trying to get clarity, sometimes gets a little blurry with the deliberation part. And this is where I think it's important to kind of be self-aware about that aspect if you can, and understand that if you get too much into deliberation before the public has spoke, it doesn't really, truly, sincerely allow them the opportunity to provide input and influence your decision-making, because that's really what they're here for. They are here to influence your decision-making. And so, staying disciplined as best you can through the questions part, getting that clarity, but holding off on your deliberation until the community's provided its input, I think is super important. What we've laid out here, obviously, is really when we're dealing with substantive items. There are items that are pretty straightforward, may not even have public comment, and there may be a combining of that kind of questions and deliberation. I think we all understand that. But on the more substantive items, and especially items that you're anticipating public comment on, I think it's important to value the public's role in that and hold off on that deliberation process. So continuing down the list of your norms, Section 2, adding agenda items.
Excuse me, Dave?
Yeah.
I have a question.
Yeah, absolutely.
Going back to the first one. So this may help me as the mayor, but back to the part where you have questions. So at that point, if I understand you correctly, our goal, it's not always going to happen, but our goal would just be, this was a question from a council to a staff member. And if there's questions between council members, ideally, they would hold off until the deliberation point?
For the most part. I mean, I think if sometimes you still feel, if you feel like you're in that, hey, I'm trying to understand what's going on here. But if you're trying to understand where that council member is coming from in terms of where they're going with their vote, then that is more the deliberation. And should all feel comfortable in deliberation, asking each other questions. What do you mean by this? Especially when you're creating motions. But I think that's the difference. You're trying to understand the issue, or you understand where somebody's coming from, and that's the two realms.
And at that point, it would be advisable that I would ask, maybe we should leave that question.
You could.
Until the deliberation.
Yeah. I mean, that's if you're all comfortable with that and understanding that, and I get it. Sometimes it's hard to kind of separate them a little bit when you're kind of going through your thought process. But there's obviously, and what we none of us want to be in a place where we're just kind of blindly following rules, understanding kind of the value behind the rules. The value behind this norm is to let the public participate before you start getting ahead of them in terms of your deliberation.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep. Okay. So in Section 2, in your norms document, you have reference to how you get things on the agenda. But since then, you've adopted another policy called the FAIR policy in 2024. So you are, I believe, now following this process that's in your packet. So it slightly differs from what's in the norms, and at some point you probably need to reconcile those differences. Hopefully this FAIR process has added some structure and is helpful to you all in terms of how you get items on the agenda. And I think we wanted to check in at this point and just really understand, is this FAIR process working for you? Are there comments or concerns about it? We probably won't be able to solve all those problems and concerns if you have any, but we'll need to understand it and then to figure out how we come back on something like that. So sounds like maybe council member, there's some input you'd like to provide.
Yeah, so I understand the intent of this. I disagree, though. I think that it should be reconsidered. I think that as elected officials, it is our job when a resident brings a concern forth that is something of value to have a conversation about, that we should be able to bring that forth and have it put on the agenda. Not saying that it'll pass, but if it's worthy enough for conversation, I think that as an elected official, it's our responsibility to bring it forth and have it done. Now, other cities do it differently where they just get one other person to to do it. But, writing this whole fair memo and trying to determine if there's, cost and all that stuff, it just seems to be more of a deterrent than allowing us to do what we've been elected to do. So I just feel that, I might bring something forward that I don't actually support, but I've been asked to bring it forward, so I bring it forward, and then it's put on the agenda and it's knocked out. But keeping in mind that if it is put on the agenda, there is no staff time at that point. It's put on the agenda for conversation. Do we want to move forward with this? And then direct staff to provide us with more information.
Okay.
Those are my thoughts.
Yes.
So I was on the council when this got created, and I used to be on the council when literally it was just what Councilmember Ramirez said. It was just any council member just throwing up an idea, and sometimes they were reacting on public comment. I found it a little bit chaotic and not as professionally run. I think that most of the time, most of the things that people bring up in public comment are not emergencies that need to get dealt with that moment. If they are, then I think staff is well prepared to take care of that. But I enjoy the professionalism of it. I like the way it looks. I like being able to get the idea that I could pitch it to other council members or other members of the community can actually read the memo and decide whether they want to support it. Maybe there's some allyship on the council, to do it jointly. And we've already seen a joint fair memo. It also allows us to kind of get a heads up on what other council members are thinking about because it shows up on our agenda matrix, right? And you get to see which council members are behind it and the idea. And maybe you've already been speaking with community groups about it. So I think it's just way more organized, that way to do it. That's all I have to think about right now.
I would say being the same way as far as seeing it happen organically and then seeing a structure to it. I prefer the structure in the process that it takes us through. So I support that, and I think it's more organized, and it's just in my view of it. So.
I was not on council when this was put together, but I was in the room for quite a few times ahead of it, and I think this was born out of dysfunction, not born out of creating function, and I think it really has to do with how meetings are conducted and the ability for those conducting the meeting, in this case the mayor and or the help of the city administrator, to be able to direct the meeting in a positive way and to deal with potential council members who are either abusing the system or maybe not completely aware of how it might go forward or how you need to go about these things. And I think this was a reactionary force against that. So I don't necessarily like the process, but I would be willing to see it go back the other way to see whether or not this mayor could handle the situations that pop up differently. And in this council, I don't think it would be as much of a problem, given the year that we've had together. But going forward, we're going to have another election. We're going to potentially have new members, and it does have the potential to come about again. So that's my perspective on it.
I agree with Kelly. It's almost like it's trying to discourage people asking to put stuff on the agenda. I think we could do it differently than it was done in the past by like has to be 2 council members to request it, or you can't ask that night that somebody brings it up here. You got to think about it and bring it back at the next meeting or something. So I think there's a way we can make it better.
Yeah.
I have to agree also with Dion and Callie. I liked it when we were able to bring forth the information right there, because maybe after it's proposed, you don't have the support of the council. It saves staff time from having to write up a staff report and then come back and report. At least you get a temperature reading if the council wants to pursue discussing it. Also, I feel it takes too long. You know, we have to write the fair memo. From the time that the item comes about to us and the time it gets put on an agenda just to discuss if the council wants to further this, could take months. And at that point, you know, are they just trying to let the fire die down and then it's like, oh, well, no, we're not going to do it. So I'd like to go back to the way it was, where items are thrown out, but with some control.
Yeah, Mayor.
I'll give my perspective, which might be slightly different than the other six, but I like the guardrails. I'm not saying that they should be set in stone, but the idea of a council member or a member of the community a bit impulsively can say, I want this on the agenda, is a little bit difficult for me because I get that all the time from my colleagues, often from my colleagues and from the members of the public. Yeah. And I do like the idea of some guardrails and the council member having to put some work into it, which the fair memo, I don't believe it has to take months. If we do it correctly and you move it through the system correctly, and maybe there's some room on the administration side to meet the concerns of Councilmember Marks about how fast it can go, that might help the process and us find because you can see we're a little bit divided on this, help find us that happy medium.
Yeah, Councilmember.
Respectfully, that's easy to say because you don't have to do a fair memo. So.
One other comment.
Yes.
You know, I sit here with my colleagues and I see a level of professionalism that I trust, that we are not reactive, knee-jerk, that we are thoughtful professionals, and we're not going to just bring something forward that, you know, because somebody complained about something, you know, that I have faith in myself and in my colleagues that we're a little bit more mindful.
Yeah. Yes, Councilmember.
So Councilmember Ramirez, I like your comment on that as opposed to your first one, because your first one got me nervous where you said, or maybe someone else, because I assume anybody that brings forward a fair memo or something they want on the agenda, they're willing to work behind it. They're not the type that would want to put something on the agenda that they don't support because they just want to see what's going to happen. That's what I interpreted your first one, but I appreciate your second, your follow-up one, because I don't think that's what you meant, that you would just throw something on the agenda that you don't support and just see what would happen. I don't. So I'm glad you just said that last part. And I think just for clarity, it'd be good to, whether it's Matt or you, to explain to the general public and everybody else too, the process to get something on the agenda. It's not just the fair memo. There's two other clear processes that could be done at any time. So if you could talk about those, or if not, I'll talk about them.
Yeah, and then just maybe I'll say something, you know, I think, so I'm just kind of hearing and listening. It sounds like there is some work that needs to be done so that you're all kind of bought into the process. So kind of have to figure out where we go from here on that. Matt's probably in a much better place to be able to describe this process. You know, I've seen it done in a million different ways. So every city does this a little different. I think there is some value to having structure to how to get things on the agenda. I came from an environment that was extremely structured. We had a rules committee, and you couldn't get anything on the agenda unless it went through a separate council committee to get there, and it was very political. You obviously don't want that here. So it's finding that right balance, what works for the city of Gilroy and what works for all of you. And I do like the word trust. You know, if you can trust each other, maybe there's, you know, less structure to it. The only kind of caveat to that is, you know, people change, and so you may not always have that trusting environment, and you have to lean on that structure a little bit more from time to time. Who knows, Matt?
I think the feedback today is good to your request, Zach. I think there's a couple of other ways. One, so in the fair memo process, it talks about how items are put on the agenda. They can be placed on the agenda by the mayor, a majority of a quorum of the council, or by the city administrator. So those are the three processes, right? So generally, the agendas are built by me and my team to put it forward, work with the mayor on a regular basis on the agenda and what it looks like. and then the FAIR memo allows that, the third option. Sounds like there's some room for additional conversation on this one. As David said, we don't need to solve it today. I did want to check in to see how it's working, so I think I'm getting a good perspective on that. Maybe we'll table this item now at the sake of the risk of leaving it sort of dangling out there and come back with a future conversation on it.
Okay with everyone? Yep. Okay. All right. The next of your norms that we're going to highlight is in council interactions, 312. To respect the independence of commissions, no council member may attempt to influence any commission or regularly attended commission meetings. So this one, I think this one can be a bit of a tricky one. The way I look at this norm that you have, and I think it's an important one, is it's valuing the role of the commission and understanding what their role is. And I'm always all about creating space for success and allowing space for that commission to be successful. I guess I just say something to all the elected officials. Don't underestimate the impact of your presence. At a commission meeting, at an event with city staff, you're all highly respected, but don't underestimate your very presence and sometimes the unintended consequences of you being there. And I know that's a funny thing to say, but you're all in powerful positions, and sometimes people are less equipped to be able to kind of manage that dynamic. So this is your norm. I think if you have any questions about this, certainly you have a right to do what you want to do your job. You do. These norms, I think, are created around kind of how you want to kind of have rules that you all are comfortable living by. And so I do think this is an important one. And if there are any questions or thoughts that people want to share, council member?
It just seemed ambiguous in the way that it's written in saying that regularly attend commission meetings, and the verbal kind of information that I've received from others is do not attend commission meetings. And anytime I see something that says regular attendance, I don't even know what that means. Compared to if I showed up once a year, is that regular? I'm not saying I will. I'm just saying I don't like whenever I read anything in guidance of how someone's supposed to act for it to have any ambiguity.
And so that is an excellent point. And once again, these are your norms and your guidelines, but there's nothing that really prohibits you from going to a meeting. In my environment where I came from, when a council member showed up at a committee meeting, there was huge intent behind that, and everyone in the room knew it. And so, I wouldn't imagine it'd be too much different here. But you're right, that's what it says, regularly attend. And so if you're being strategic about it, but really these norms are for you to all be comfortable with and hold each other accountable with. Matt, I don't know if you want to add anything, but that's what they're here for.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
Just for clarity before Matt speaks. So my understanding of this norm is, irregardless of how it's written.
Sure.
And I agree, there's ambiguity to it. But the intent of this is we're not supposed to influence commissioners. Yeah. We're not supposed to direct commissioners. We're not supposed to suggest to commissioners. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's the value in it, is not to undue influence commissioners. What I was sharing my perspective is sometimes you being in the room.
Right. Influences. Yeah. So, I think that for the sake of not being ambiguous, it needs to be very clearly stated, because that is the intent. Yeah. I'm not suggesting how to state it, but I would think that it needs to be, our role is absolutely, to take the recommendation of commissioners. Their role is to recommend to us without our influence.
Yeah. It's about creating this space for success. So yes, council member?
Another thing too that would be probably good to wordsmith this again is that it was before COVID, these commission meetings, because I was on one of them for 4 years, they were not recorded, audio, video. You were not given notice of when these meetings were going to be held. There was no like internal loop. There was no broadcast out of like, hey, come join us at the council chambers for this meeting.
Yeah.
So it was very hard for council members back then to have any sort of like, what'd you guys talk about? Like, because I don't know if I trust the minutes, right? Or have the minutes been posted? Or, you have to wait too long. COVID changed all that because we went to a hybrid model. So now all of a sudden, all of us have access to every single one, and you can just listen in, which was huge. And thankfully today, we use that OWL, device or whatever. So all of our commission meetings, committee meetings go on YouTube. Mm-hmm. So it makes it a lot easier to be able to pay attention in there. And I agree with you that they're just norms. No one's going to tell any 7 of us what we can or can't do. It's up to us. But I appreciate you at least acknowledging that, there is a political game that's going on in Gilroy. It does exist here, and there's certain times where people would want to show up for certain things. But I think maybe for those that are outside this room that want to be a part of this council or get into city government, and they read these norms, because these norms used to be hidden. Mm-hmm. They were not, when I first got elected, they were not on our website. I had no idea that they existed.
Interesting.
Right? So that's another thing. It's like, oh, we have norms. I had no idea we had norms. But I think that it would be worth stating on there as kind of like a training for the future us. Like, hey, on YouTube, you can watch every single meeting. You can listen to it whenever you want. There's 24/7 access. I think that would provide some context rather than someone reading this and going like Kelly said, like, why'd they write that? What was going on with this? Rather than just stating specifically, like, don't abuse your power in this certain sense, but you can have access to these meetings whenever you want.
Yeah. Mayor?
I would like to ask you a question. Is there a way that we could avoid the use of command influence, but we still, as council members, we think it's important to empower our commissioners?
Yeah.
And and I think most of our council members here, at some point in time, have gotten a sense from our commissioners that maybe in certain cases they aren't being empowered enough by the staff member that they're being led by. And I think sometimes that's where we start to get itchy. Yeah. And we want to make sure that they're empowered to do what they feel like they can or should do as a commissioner.
Yeah.
But if they're getting the only thing that they know is guidance from staff, is where these council members would want to empower them, but try not to influence them.
I mean, that sounds like a conversation with the city administrator, honestly.
Yeah, I think that commissions are established with a role. And so revisiting that role on a regular basis is probably important, especially with the commissions to talk about what their roles and responsibilities are. And we should certainly do that as a council as well, is to take a look at the roles and responsibilities. I think empower is a pretty broad word. So in my experience, commissions are established to be advisory to the council. Their goal is to be an arm into the community, a different connection to the community than what you have, sort of to broaden that reach on a focused area. So it allows, they have that ability to really focus on their area, whether it be Parks and Rec or arts and culture, whatever it might be. They can dig in those areas and really provide information up to you. And the key is allowing them to provide that information up to you versus the council helping to focus them in a particular direction. Right? What are their priorities? They check in with you, right? They give you their work plan. You have an opportunity to provide input on that. But having the commission free to provide information up to you without being influenced is important. We also sometimes delve into the area of commissions doing what is really professional work, and so we need to be careful of where they are from that perspective. So certainly hosting events and doing cleanups at parks or art walks, that kind of thing fits right in. There is a line there somewhere that we should probably define in terms of what their roles and responsibilities are.
Councilmember?
I think improving the visibility of those meetings in AV The OWL is great. It's an improvement. In fact, when I was on the Open Government Commission, I pushed really hard to get every one of those meetings because it wasn't just COVID. Even after COVID, there were a bunch of meetings that were not, and there was a lot of resistance at the time to bring video into those meetings. And as good as it is, the OWL is problematic because it doesn't give you a sense of the room. It doesn't give you a sense of speakers, the public coming in. And so I think I've been reticent to attend any one of these because of this council norm. And I would be less likely to want to do that if the AV were better in all of those meetings.
So I just want to throw something on the record for that. I 100% agree with you. When I was on the commission, we actually used to sit up on the dais. And what that OWL has forced us to is force this group to sit in the corner, sit at this little tiny table, don't get practice to be up there. And as many of us were former commission members and community members, that was a big deal to go sit up there. It's like, hey, maybe one day I could be a council member. Maybe one day I could be the mayor. And forcing them to be in this corner, I don't think empowers them, our future leaders, to not have that experience. And I think it's probably really inexpensive at this point to hit a static camera and go live on YouTube on there. So just dropping it there.
Okay. All right, great input. Okay. We're about halfway through here on the norms. Okay, next one on your norms, staff relations, 4.1 and 4.2. Staff will share relevant information equally to the council. And then the second piece, council will communicate through the city administrator and department heads. So two important pieces here that kind of go hand in hand. The first part to me is really about a commitment to all of you from the administration that for providing information to one of you, relevant information gets to all of you. And that's a super strong commitment that needs to be made, and it's in your norms. The second part is kind of how you communicate to the administration, typically done through the city administrator, the city manager. Matt's recognizing and being pragmatic and saying, well, I need my department heads involved with that part of the process. He can't be this complete funnel where everything just goes through him. So the department heads are accessible to you for seeking information. That doesn't mean they may not from time to time, involve other staff members, but that's the initiation of the communication. Next one, 4.5. The council's focus is on policy, staff focus on professional execution, getting the work done, and technical knowledge. We've all seen this is in your norms. It's kind of probably the point of most tension that I see around working for a lot of different cities. It's easy to say and not always easy to do as a council member, I think. And it's not to say that your background and your expertise and where you came from is not important. It's super important. It's super important to you as you're making decisions. But it's about kind of creating space for the staff to do their work and really understanding roles. And certainly your role as policymaker, staff's role is providing expertise, either themselves or through consultants from time to time. And just elevating to that policy level, I think that's an important kind of context here for this norm. And so, I've never been a council member. I've never kind of had to sort through kind of doing that. I've thought about it a lot in my mind. Where I have the closest analogy is, I used to be the public works director in San Jose, 10th largest city in the country, pretty much an expert on a lot of things, and ultimately I've become the city manager and I appoint another public works director. How do I give that public works director space to do their job? And if anything, I kind of went the other way, making sure that I was not having that public works director look over his shoulder. And so the analogy here is creating space for people to be successful, recognizing you all bring a lot to the table. And yes, that's important for your decision making, but creating space for others to also be successful. Okay. Section 5, council communications. 5.3, when sitting as a representative on a city or another body, you're representing the city's position. This one, I think is a challenging one because it's actually the complete opposite of what you're doing when you're on the city council. When you're on the city council, you are bringing forward your own opinions. You are bringing forward all your own thoughts. It is you advocating for your position, trying to advocate for the community. Then you're on this outside board, and now it has flipped. You are no longer advocating for yourself. You are advocating for the city of Gilroy, and you are advocating for that position that the city is taken. Now, there may be times where you're unclear about what that position is, and there's ways to seek that clarity, checking in with the city administrator. You may need to go back to council and get some clarity. Often things come up on outside boards where maybe your city hasn't yet taken a position on that. And you may be forced to kind of respond, and it's not inappropriate to say, hey, we haven't taken a position on that. I have my own feelings about it. Of course I do. But we need to, as a team, as an organization, get together and figure out what our city position is on that. There's value in that, of course. It can be frustrating for outside boards to feel like they're dealing with a person's opinion versus the city's opinion. And it's very important that the city of Gilroy be at the table at all of these meetings with the city's position being clear to these other boards. So I think that clarity is really where that comes from. Section 6, council travel. I think the part that we were highlighting here is just, and this is a minor one, I think, in my point of view. But if you're the primary and you can't be there, try to work super hard to get your alternate or somebody else to be there. It's just very important that the city of Gilroy's voice is heard at every single board meeting outside the city. And so I'm sure there's times that maybe that can't happen, but give it as best a try as you can. So those are the ones that we were highlighting. I think you're in great place here having these norms. Obviously, there might be some adjustments that need to be made. I think we do want to do a check-in here, though, just making sure that generally are the norms working. Are there other ones that we haven't highlighted that maybe should be looked at a little closer? And does, having all of this work make sense to you all and you bought into it? Yes, council member?
1.23, council members must be in the queue prior to making a motion on an item. I don't even know what that means.
I'll respond to that. We don't actually use the digital voting or queuing up anyways, right? I mean, the city clerk can talk about it. It's a feature. I think that at some point it would be worth going literally line by line by line through this and cutting it down. Yeah, I know that's not for today, but I
agree. I only
stuff like that.
Pointed a couple of things in mind that I knew were more completely out of context, but I think it can be cut down. And in terms of the council norms for following the meeting order and whatnot, I don't know that it should be followed as 1.23. But I do like the idea of using technology and having it run in a particular order that makes it easier for everybody to understand how it's going to work.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm not going to talk all day, so I just wanted to say, I think that comes from Robert's rules. I think it's a throwback from it where, a lot of times cities say you have to have a motion on the table before deliberations and stuff like that. I think this comes from Robert's rules, and it's the old way that you needed to have, be next in line to speak, and now it's electronically, so you're next in line in the queue, but it's probably something that needs to be looked at under modern days, because Robert's rules are very old-fashioned.
Yes, council member.
Yeah, when we put that in there, it was because we had council members just throwing motions out, and other ones throwing motions opposite of that one. It was crazy. So that's when we put that in there.
Mayor.
Again, I have faith in the mayor, in being able to order. I take that one out completely, and it would be fine with me. Just similar to the Fair Memo situation, this is a process with a new mayor and with the way things get run that I think should be played out in as most open way possible. And if it needs to be reeled back in, then we reel it back in. But the reason things were the way they were was because of a council member over here mentioning of 21 years, who's been here through all of it, the evolution that happened for different people. So I'd rather see it play out in a more open form, see how Mayor Bozo basically manages it, and go from there.
I just want to comment on 4.1, the idea that council members ask questions and then staff replies to all council. I think over the past year and a half, that's ebbed and flowed. I love it. I think our council asks great questions, and it makes us all more prepared for the council meeting if we get answers back to all of us.
Yeah.
I think it's a great idea.
Yeah.
And then I have a comment for you. It might even be a question. Sorry, I know you're on a time schedule here. Regarding when council members are on other bodies. This has been interesting, and I hope that we get better at this. So I sat on Cities Association last year. Now Councilmember Ramirez sits on it. On that particular body, there may be some topics that are moving along so quickly that the next thing you know, that you're sitting around this room with representatives from every city in Santa Clara County, and you're being asked to make a recommendation to the state on a bill.
Yeah.
Right? So I'm saying that out loud, so Councilmember Ramirez knows that that's coming, and that I want her to feel comfortable to either try to slow that process down and bring it back to us, because I think it makes us all better to be able to talk about some of these bills that are at the state level.
Yeah, and great point. And there may be times where you need to try to slow it down, And obviously, you can be strategic about that. You may not need to have input on every single issue that comes forward, but on the ones that are important to this city, then asking for it to slow down and for your process to work for you, you're totally within your rights to do that.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Any other thoughts? I mean, it does feel like there's still work to do on the norms. As I mentioned at the beginning, when Matt and I went through them, this could probably be streamlined a bit and maybe some of it taken into a different type of document. And so, at the end of the day, what's important is that you feel like this kind of is a good fit for you all, that it's providing some structure, but not, completely hamstringing you from doing what you think is right for the city. So I guess I'll leave it to you, Matt, on how that gets done. Okay. Okay, so we're going to move into the legislative.
Excuse me,
yeah.
Did we ask for public comment on the council norms, or it's not the time when we're doing that, or I just want to?
Well, we did prior.
Right. Okay.
We're going to have public comment.
It's up to you. Okay. So legislative agenda and work plan. And so what are these items? So these are key priorities for the council and staff, the legislative agenda from the council's perspective and the work plan from staff's perspective. Obviously, there's a blend here. These items are typically, come from individual council discussions where there's action being taken or going to be taken. There's timelines to these items. They have a start and a finish. This is not ongoing work when we're talking about the legislative agenda and department work plan. And they're typically efforts that they take a significant amount of work. I will note that from the department work plan, that the CIP projects have been removed from that, and that's being contained within the CIP. And so when you're not seeing CIP projects there, it's because they're being contained somewhere else. And so this is all about having a work plan. And why have a work plan? I think it's our city's roadmap to kind of where we're going and what we're doing. It's all about how we strive for better services for the community, and along the way, acknowledging that we have limited resources. And so how do we prioritize that work to make sure that we're getting the most important work done? And hopefully, if done right, it ensures that we're getting things done on time and within budget. And so this work plan and our roadmap is helpful to doing that. Actually, I'd say critical to doing that. So this chart, I've kind of referenced over the years. And it really explains how things fit together in terms of what is the legislative agenda and what is the work plan. I will tell you, in just about every city, the vast majority of resources in the city are committed to day-to-day work. They're not actually committed to the work plan and the legislative agenda. And the fact is, really, most of the work done in that realm is by you folks and by managers and leaders within the city. So it's not 250 staff working on the top part of this. It's a dozen people or so working on it. And that's really where the capacity constraints come in. And so when we're adding more items to the legislative agenda or work plan, recognition of kind of, there's only a few people really working on that. And so there has to be acknowledgement of, what can we do? So in the spreadsheets that have been provided, there's two sets, the legislative agenda, and there's line items for each one, and there's the department work plans. What you see here is kind of a simplification of a characterization of the priorities. And obviously this is up for discussion, but what I think the team has attempted to do is put some priority designations to the items. And for now, for the sake of this discussion, but like I said, you can kind of revisit this, priority one are high priority items, really need to be done, and there's ramifications if they're not done. Priority two, medium priority, benefit to the organization to do these items. Priority three, lower priority, sometimes aspirational, good business practice. And then priority four, these are the priorities that get picked up as they can, and really it's based on capacity availability. As I look through it, the legislative agenda is all ones and twos, and a couple of threes and no fours. So it seems that a lot of priority is appropriately placed on the legislative agenda. On the department work plans, I look through those ones and twos, but a lot more threes and fours on that. And so, as we kind of talk through this today, this will most likely lead to discussions about, where these things fit on the list and whether more resources need to be applied. Is there additional funding that needs to be applied to things to make them happen? The lists include target dates. I think, often target dates are established without even fully understanding scope, and so there needs to be clarity on what the scope of these things are, and we're going to go through the legislative agenda line item by line item to make sure that we're kind of on the same page about what the scope of these things are. And then, of course, once that scope is fully understood, you can set timelines and goals that are realistic to that particular item.
Can I make a comment about
Yes,
or a question and comment about the format of the grids? In order for something like this to be super useful to someone like me, in addition to seeing an estimated completion date as we're moving through things and we go, 2 quarters in or a year in and we come back to this, I want to know what the initial estimated completion date is, and I want to know that it's been updated, right? And this is a new, and in parentheses next to it, the third time the completion date has changed and the new one that it is, right? So when things are actually starting to creep and move out that you have and have taken longer than usual. And the same thing goes for the milestones. So it's just a comment before we get into this that if we can adjust some of the form factor of this, I think it'll be much more useful for at least this council member to be able to understand how certain things have been progressing. There's all sorts of reasons and everything why things don't go the way they're supposed to, but we have no idea if, when I look at this, was that the original one that come up, or is that a new one that all of a sudden it's creeped out on? Thank you.
Yeah, and what you're talking about is really a baseline to kind of measure from. Yeah. All right, we're almost there. I think we talked earlier about a partnership and kind of how all this fits together. So, to your point, staff's commitment is to make continued progress and to provide updates, and perhaps that can be measured against a baseline. So, that all makes sense, I think. And so their commitment is to really focus on these items and not work off agenda, not work on their own priorities. It's commitment to this. In return, you're also committing to be disciplined about how items get on the work plan, how items get into the legislative agenda in particular. And as you know, every council meeting, as you contemplate other items going on the list, how does that impact the other items on the list? And being thoughtful about that and understanding that you can't keep adding to it without there obviously being impacts. And so there should be just appropriate conversation about that and how you all work through that. So I think, we're going to jump into the legislative agenda. Before I do that, another document was included in your packet, completed or canceled items. I think, I'm a big fan of just not letting things complete in obscurity. So it's good to kind of acknowledge that there has been ongoing progress on items that have been on the legislative agenda. And so just acknowledging, that work is going on and has been completed. If there's comments or questions about that, we can certainly revisit that, but making sure that we acknowledge that. Okay. Now, I guess we're not going to have the legislative agenda on the screen, I don't think. Oh, maybe we are. Okay, good. Good. So we're jumping over to that.
Maybe, Kim, could you go zoom to where just the priorities are on the list on the right side, so we get a little bit more readability?
Okay, so we are going to go line item by line item here. And so these aren't in priority order. Number one is line item 1. It's not priority 1. The priority column is over to the right, which does show up, and it's obviously in the packet. So I think what we're trying to do here is, are there any questions for clarity, concerns about the scope? Should it or should it not be on the list? Ultimately, I think. And so there, you will, at the end of this section, have the opportunity to kind of vote on your top 5 and bottom 5, and we'll get through that. Anything you want to add, Matt, before I go through this? Or
Yeah, I'm not. So we did have some version control challenges. So if they're not in order on your particular sheet, we'll give a second on each one. We'll call it out. It may not be in the exact line item order. Reason for that is there was some sorting on delivery date, sort of when that would be versus that being the furthest out versus the most closest to the deadline. So there's them and what the priority was. So we'll go through them. We'll take a minute to read each one again. How they fall on this list isn't really important. There's no prioritization necessarily in the numbering on the left column.
Okay, so on my version, line item 1 is, the project name is Communication and Support for District-Based Elections. Any comments, questions, thoughts about this? It's been designated as a priority 1, not on the screen, but on your chart. It shows some of the dates in terms of estimated completion date and the next milestone.
And I'll just say that I did circulate sort of our schedule and what we're doing for outreach and engagement associated with district-based elections. I think that's what this was focused around, is the support there. So we have a plan that we're working on delivery this year with a very deliberate approach to communication with residents that lasts through November. And then we'll sort of regroup and rinse and repeat that for the next election cycle. So we'll have it in place. Obviously, we can tweak and adjust if we see additional needs.
If I could request, when we're going through each and every one of these, if the estimated completion date has changed from the prior work plan, if it's noted, and let us know what that change was, because obviously we went through this a year ago, and I don't know, again, based around the original question I had. So
yeah, and I'm not privy to dates that were committed to previously, and I don't know. Yeah, I think what was adopted through the budget process was just a list without any.
So there never was a date before. This is the first time a date's been assigned to this.
And
same thing on the work plan? Oh, really? Okay.
But I agree with you that as they do change, I agree with you that if they do change, that we should have that noted. I would like that information.
Yeah, valuable
Moving forward.
information. We get it.
I just want to note my appreciation for the fact that we now have dates.
I want to add something on that too,
Yeah.
just to throw it out there, because you guys were both in the public works field, where you're kind of used to like, this is at 30% design, 35% design, 40% complete, like that kind of stuff. I don't know whether that would sort of satisfy you or give you like a better idea or way to look at it.
It's impossible to know because the percentage, it depends on what the metric is, right? So is it, percentage of days, percentage of what have you? It absolutely, each one of these items, for instance, on a work plan, what my expectation would be is that there's another spreadsheet for that particular thing that has the milestones on that one, which also says, this is where we expect to be. And those sheets can be made available. So it says on there, like, okay, this was the original date that this milestone was supposed to be completed. This is when it, what it is. So that to me, just to be following along is much more valuable because sometimes 80% of the work is in the last 20% of whatever something is that you do. But thank you.
Another way I've seen it done is red, green, and yellow, right? So, there's a green, right? It's highlighted in green. We're moving along as planned, no hiccups. We're going to hit that deadline. Yellow is we've run into an obstacle, and then at that point, what is that obstacle? What's the plan to overcome it? Has it pushed it back a little bit? Or are we going to be able to catch up? Type of thing. Red is hey, we've run into a major obstacle. We're not going to hit this roadblock. We don't know when we're not going to hit this milestone timeline. This is the major, this is the new timeline, that type of thing. So we kind of, not real nitty gritty into the detail, but kind of like giving us a heads up that, hey, this is going to be postponed a little bit. We are running into some major issues with this. We'll come back to you next month with the plan to work around that or whatever. Just more high level.
Yeah, very good. I think, the having a baseline and having a process for identifying kind of when you're kind of not on course, I think the great ways of kind of dealing with it. And we want to be able to hold ourselves accountable, but we also want to be reasonable with ourselves if we are encountering roadblocks that are outside our control, or even as simple as, from the project world, what often impacts a schedule is scope creep. The actual project has changed from the original project. And so there's ways to kind of keep track of all that and still be accountable to a schedule and a timeline. Okay, on my list, so I think on item number 1, it sounds like there's clarity on this specific item and comfort level with it. Item number 2 on my list is review the city policy and general fund investment in recreation services and programs. Priority 2, and it sounds like you plan on, in the project description, using a consultant to conduct what I see as a very thorough assessment. Any questions or thoughts about this item?
So you'll see by the milestone that you'll be seeing this on the 6th of April, so very soon. So good progress on moving this forward. The 6th will be the recommendation for award of a contract to the consultant. So we'll be starting that. But you also see that there's a significant body of work involved with that because the completion date is a full year away. So a big item, and the scope is important on this one. You'll have an opportunity, like I said, to talk about it on the 6th. So very near term. But it's a full look at where we're at from a recreation program and what our options and availabilities are. So a little bit of a deep dive on recreation services.
Is this is the one that some people are referring to as the recreation assessment? All right.
Okay. All right, on my list, item number 3, consideration of revising the tobacco ordinance and a moratorium on new tobacco retailers during revision process.
Not much discussion on this one, right?
Councilmember?
Yeah, I think as far as the timing and everything, it's very premature given the inability for the city to enforce the current ordinances that we have in a timely manner. So I think me trying to consider any kind of legislation around tobacco without knowing the fallout of how many tobacco places are going to still exist after the completion of the enforcement, which seems to be taking a long time. So I'm not interested in it at all, actually.
So I'll remind, just a reminder that we'll do a top 5, bottom 5. So great opportunity to put it on there. This one has progress, so you're likely to see it. I do owe the council an update on where we're at in terms of enforcement, what that looks like. So I'll make sure that that you get that this week, so you have some additional information.
Okay, next item, item 4 on my list, is review of campaign finance laws, contribution limits, and enforcement options. This is with the administration and the city attorney, and it's currently designated as a priority 3. Any comments or thoughts on that one?
I'll talk about it because I know me and Councilmember Fugazi have already been working on this one with the city attorney and stuff, but I actually don't recall if that was passed along to the council or not. I don't think it did. Okay, and so so it says on here that I'm not even familiar with these dates or whatever. This is supposed to come forward on May 4th. What is that? That is true.
Yeah, this is all current information as of Friday. So.
Okay.
So I'll take this opportunity to address sort of the statement that you made that you and Councilmember were working on this with the attorney, really trying, and we'll work on it probably over some time, trying to reiterate or identify where that line is between staff work and council work. So as a legislative agenda item, this really should be something that you hold us accountable to delivering on. And it should be your oversight at a council level versus 2 council members driving the direction of what it looks like. So just
this is definitely coming about during the interim or city administrator time frame. And,
understood, yeah.
Given the fact that you're at the helm now, I think absolutely. But at the same time, it should be understood that we're in an election year and people are doing fundraising, and we just went to district-based elections, which can change everything in people's way of interpreting what's currently on the books. So it does have some urgency in that manner.
Yep, and as you see, you'll be talking about it in May, so it's coming fairly quick.
The only comment I want to, before we keep going on, is was this on the agenda matrix?
I was going to ask, was this something that we brought forth during our last quote-unquote strategic plan?
Yeah, we talked about, go ahead, Matt.
Yeah, so these items that are on the blue list are all items that were thrown out as priorities from individual council members last year about this time when you sat down with Jimmy to go through it. There was no, at that time, it was put the list together. There was no discussion on whether things belonged on the list or not. They were just added to the list. And so this is verbatim where it is, and that's why I wanted to check in. I wanted to make sure that, one, this is still relevant and that there's a majority of the council that supports these ideas. So I think we'll get to that through the conversation today. So that was number one priority. The second was sort of making sure that the verbiage in the project name and the scope that we've come up with associated with that are aligned, right? So project name is straight out of your list of what came up and was adopted through the budget process. And then the project description is our interpretation based on what we've heard on what that looks like. So this is an opportunity to make sure that we're in alignment through the description with what you intended to be.
Thank you.
And I just want to make sure that the agenda matrix that you and the city clerk are sending out match this, because seems like 2 of these items on here that are coming forward weren't on the agenda matrix. That's all I'm saying.
We'll make sure to fact check
that they align.
Yep.
Thank you.
Yes, Councilmember.
Yes, what's concerning to me is that we have council members basically doing their own thing, talking to our attorneys, which costs us money to do something that the council's not aware of, which I have no problem with you guys doing that, but it should come to the council and the council appoint a subcommittee to work with the attorney to get this done. And that way we'd have more control over when it's going to be done. because I think we're kind of behind the 8 ball now, you know. 'Cause people,
did it.
people,
No, but you had to bring
you
it
should have brought it to
to
the
the group.
council
Okay, so,
to see if we were interested in doing it.
so I'm a noob, okay? And our city attorney has been here, a noob.
Oh,
Maybe a rube in your mind, but, you know, but our city attorney has been here since the dark ages. And so I would expect that he would have an understanding that myself or council member Hilton is out of line, raise that to the city administrator and put us in check, right? And at that point I'd go, oh, gosh, sorry. And if that doesn't happen, then I don't know, so.
Yeah, I think you pointed it out, right? There's been some transitions and things have been unstable. We're headed on a new course here. We'll get it straightened out.
Okay. On mine, line item 5, evaluate the annexation of Gilroy Sports Parks. And so the description that staff has put together for that, City Administrator's Office to evaluate the annexation of Gilroy Sports Park. If evaluation determines to proceed, direct Community Development Department to apply to LAFCO for annexation. Any comments, concerns, points of clarity needed for that?
So layers on this one, right? As conversations occur around the sports park in the future of the sports park, this may change in priority. So there's an opportunity for us to do that over time. Right now, we've got a timeline, I think, of October for this coming back to the council. It's a priority 3, so it's one of those that at the current time isn't at the top of the list in terms of urgency, but it's something that we're watching and that we'd like to get done.
So you want us to wait on all priority talks, but you're going to tell us about why the priority is where it is. That's fine. Is that?
No,
So we're not to talk about any of the prioritization right now,
no.
right?
The entire list is game. Talk about the item individually as we get to them, for sure. And if there's something that's lower.
This one is directly linked, in my opinion, to what's happening with Gilroy Ice, obviously, and goes hand in hand in it. And if negotiating and working on Gilroy Ice is a 1, this is a 1, right? It's kind of like they really go together, and obviously the council has to weigh in if they think that's the same. I get all of that, but in this particular committee members' discussions, that's how I felt. So seeing it as a 3, given our desire to develop out that south end of the city so much, is somewhat worrisome. Not that it's a 3 and can't change, that somebody sees it as a 3 is more worrisome.
Yeah,
I
Councilman?
have a question about, just it's a clarity, not on any specific
Yeah.
line item. But in the process of identifying top 5, bottom 5, does that, let's say something goes to the bottom 5, does that change the date then? Or is that date then up for conversation? If it moves to the top, if it moves to the bottom, does the date stay the same, or does the date then get negotiated?
So a couple of thoughts here. So the top 5, bottom 5 is to help us with because this list was created without sort of a conversation around do the items belong on the list or not. It's to sort of start into that conversation a little bit. What are the ones that are more relevant for council, and what are the ones that are least relevant for council? We'll have a conversation if the sort of the tally at the end tells us that there's a trend. Maybe one item has 7 bottom of the list on it. We need to have a talk about whether that item belongs on the list or not, right? So that's the whole point of that. So we'll do the tally, then we'll come back and talk about what the tally tells us and where items belong. With respect to if it's even distribution across the list, right? It doesn't tell us anything. That's fine too. We'll keep all of the items on here. The prioritization sort of informs us on high level of urgency on where we want to move with it. Right now, because generally the Sharks conversation, as an example, has been slower, that item's slowed down a little bit. There's a potential that could change, right? And so if the Sharks are back at the table and there's significant progress there, then we may want to bump this one up and get it done sooner. I think an October timeframe is still a pretty reasonable timeframe even with that. But it's open for conversation with you all on what happens. Know that we don't work on these things individually and get one done and then move to the next. The work's happening concurrently, right?
I don't see an October, I see a June 30th on both the estimated completion date and estimated next milestone date. For
You're,
this,
Yes.
Yep,
Yep.
okay.
I was off the line.
Okay, I'm going to keep moving forward. The next item on my list, number 6, is develop a city policy on a regional approach to housing unhoused challenges. So this is develop a city policy for council consideration regarding the city's efforts toward regional approaches to address housing and unhoused challenges. Councilmember?
I understand the importance of this particular item. I think that staff developing a direction on this quasi in a vacuum from overall council member feedback is probably not as effective as it could be. I think a study session on this particular item is absolutely necessary so that when we're spending all the time, staff time, developing what they think something should be, it will more closely fall in line with what council members will already be in agreement with and have a higher chance of hitting the finish line when it gets there.
I agree 100% that a study session should be done. I have spent an enormous amount of time with different cities looking over their best practices and successes and challenges that I would like to bring to council before an enormous amount of staff time is being spent creating and drafting for consideration. I would like to share what I have gleaned from my research, and perhaps that will change the direction to staff. So I think a study session on this sooner rather than later would be my preference. But that may be an early conversation on this process. So.
Anything you want to add, Matt?
You're going to be slow to comment just in case there's other council member input.
I was just going to say I concur with both
Yeah.
Councilmember Fugazzi and Councilmember Ramirez.
I say the same thing.
Councilmember?
Yeah, I agree, but I think we need to take a different approach of being more council-led. Because in the past, it's always, we get a bunch of information from staff. Well, so if we continue down the road we've always been going on, we're just going to get the same thing back because that's what they view and that's the information they have. So I would like to have it where, like you, Kelly, bringing information that we haven't seen or heard before that we can consider.
That's a great idea, and I think that staff can do well before a study session to send out a top 10 questions or 10 things, or how do you feel about this, or do you have some example you would like to bring to the meeting, and actually facilitate the conversation before the conversation, right? And then when we get together, we really have a lot of really good information to all go, wow, I didn't know that, I didn't know this. If you don't do that, and if you don't set an expectation with council members to bring that stuff to the table, everybody's busy, everybody does something else. There's no guilt in not bringing something because you weren't asked to bring something. So anyway, that's my...
And actually, I almost would prefer that staff not even spend time on it until we have a conversation. I would like to share what I have gotten. I've gotten a ton of information that I think council, in my opinion, I think, council will get behind. I would rather have staff just kind of listen, then maybe, come back to us with, okay, clarification, that type of thing. But I'd rather staff not spend a lot of time ahead of time, my opinion. But I do believe a study session needs to happen sooner rather than later.
Sounds like we're due for a study session.
Excellent. All right, next item on mine is 7, Climate Action Plan. I, in my mind, feel like this is closely related to number 8, which is VMT and TDM. But on line item 7, climate action plan, develop and adopt climate action plan to help implement the 2040 general plan.
I will say these items, in our first iteration of bringing this forward, were combined into one. They are interrelated and should happen at the same time. I pulled them back apart because on the list that was adopted, they were separate items. So I wanted to stay true to that to some extent. That the progress would be aligned on these.
Councilmember?
So when we see something that has a column that says mandated, and it's binary, that's great. It doesn't really explain to me by what it's mandated and to what level it's mandated. Meaning, yes, we have to do something in regards to a climate action plan. The minimum that we have to do is this, right? So that in helping guide policy, we're not saying, oh yeah, well, that's mandated. Go ahead, go do whatever you want to do, right? And I don't know that it belongs here or it belongs in a separate communication from you, but anytime something's mandated, understanding what the minimum is we have to do, because maybe some council members just want to do the minimum or kick it down the road and pay the fine, you know?
And I agree with you, and I asked Matt about this yesterday in our meeting because, you know, I wanted to know whether this was state mandated or if this was mandated based on a grant and where that grant initiated from, things like this. And so, Matt, if you could kind of talk a little bit about, you know, the impact fees that this has, and then the timeline, because I think that to your point, I had the same concerns. If you could kind of restate and talk about that a little bit.
Sure. So with respect to line item 8, which is the vehicle miles traveled policy, the state changed CEQA law several years ago and moved away from level of service analysis to vehicle miles traveled analysis. So that in order to adequately assess a project as it comes through for CEQA purposes, we need a basis to do that evaluation. Typically, those are set up through a local policy, and that would be established through adoption of a VMT policy locally that would allow us our own specific requirements for developments in terms of vehicle miles traveled, as well as potential, if the council so chooses, to establish impact fees for those projects that don't meet our thresholds. We do have a fallback there, so this goes to the question of what level of mandate is it, and do we need to comply? There's a fallback at a countywide level that we can use for the analysis. But really, as you know, we're at the edge of the county, and so we have a little bit of a different environment. So there's opportunities here to clean this up. So this is something that's overdue in terms of timeline. It should have been done probably a couple of years ago, but given other priorities, it's one of those ones that sort of slipped, and the council's identified it at the priority session as something that they wanted to focus on. So.
And I think the concern is the VMT piece of it, right?
Yeah.
When I see VMT, when the public sees VMT, are we going to be taxing the driver, right? So if you can speak to that.
Yeah. So VMT is not about taxing the driver. VMT is about when a development occurs, how many miles are the people who use that development going to travel in their use of that development. And there's this long, elaborate model, very complex model that's been established to measure this. Those cities that are further away from job centers have a significantly higher VMT than an established state level. So there tends to be an impact across the board there. So the state's driving towards development near where the job centers are, which is a little bit counter to their build housing everywhere mantra, but something that we have to work through in our policies and setting things up. So that's sort of where we want to go, is measuring how many vehicle miles we expect an occupant of a particular development to travel, and what the impacts are to that locally and regionally, and how to manage that.
And in doing so, we are keeping in mind that we are not San Jose. And to your point, we're the southernmost city in the county where the jobs are more up in the San Jose area. We do not want to this is not penalizing our residents for living down here and having to travel north.
The council can decide what the mitigation measures are for an individual development, but it's not a targeted broad swath at our residents.
Thank you.
Yeah, Councilmember?
Just a couple of things that I want to advocate for. So yeah, we have been using county VTA to evaluate all of our projects for years now, which means that, yes, we are a member agency in VTA, but when it comes to that policy, but we are literally using someone else's ideas for what we think should work here. So that really brings us home. And I was one of the council members that brought this up and kept this on our work plan. And yeah, it never got funding. We tried to pitch for it. We tried to find different ways. It wasn't a priority, didn't have funding. And then we finally got this grant, right? So it is tied to funding now. And that is how, we're able to move this forward. And I want to push back a little bit. Not all the public or the advocates out there think that VMT means you're going to tax us. I know that there is that rumor that's going around out there for people that don't want to see this. I get that. But we have very well-educated advocacy groups and members of our community that know that this is not that, and that know that things like complete streets and stuff like that means that we no longer want to have a development come into town and have everybody plan how quickly they can drive their car there. But using other terms like transit, walking, biking, and that will bring that type of infrastructure and investment into our city if we plan for that kind of stuff. If on the VTA level, I can tell you that if we continue to always prioritize cars and how quickly a car can go from their garage to that shopping center, that they're not going to invest in transit anymore down here. But if we show, hopefully in this VMT policy, if we're able to show some initiative like, wow, that's actually really good thinking, the way you guys are planning things out, that'll help us more at the board level to push for more transit and more frequent transit down here, because it's Gilroy's policy. It's no longer sort of the county's policy. Thank you.
A good point from Councilmember Hilton that we do have grant funding for this project, so that helps in terms of momentum on the project.
What I'll say is that I understand the confusion of the public on this matter, because even sitting here and reading through stuff and even listening to all of this, I am completely confused. So I'll simplify it this way in terms of trying to keep it in line with what we're talking about here today, is that in these discussions, in the way that things come forward, I think it's prudent on the staff and our communications as well with residents to try to put things at ease and in simpler terms, in terms of, I want to know that there's not going to be an impact to an individual resident in cost. And I want to know that from a business development perspective, that if there is a mandated cost increase that we have to have, that we're figuring out a way to mitigate that through some other means, and that we communicate that to new businesses and people looking to develop and do things here, that we get that this is this crazy thing called VMT, and there's all of this other stuff that I don't understand, but at the end of the day, we've done this so it's not impacting here in Gilroy, because we understand that we're unique and different. And if we can boil it down to that, and we do that in the scope of what we see here, then I think everybody is going to have a better understanding and feel much more at ease.
I agree. As I sit here, I'm looking at these topics, and I have so many questions in how I rank them, because there's so much information that I don't know. I mean, I have Councilmember Hilton saying that the county is working on VMT and these policies, but I don't know exactly what that work is. I don't know what that means. The tobacco ordinance, yeah, to me, that's really important. However, there's a lot of vagueness out there, and I don't know where we're going at the moment. I mean, we are going through each of these, and then I'm assuming, now you need to correct me, are we going to be able to go back and discuss some of these items to say, what does this actually mean, so we can rank them? Or are we just going to be turned loose to rank something on insufficient evidence and information?
Yeah, and I wouldn't kind of overstate kind of this ranking, this 5 top and 5 bottom, in terms of how that's going to translate. I think the intention of the 5 and the 5 was to kind of get a feel from you all. Is this the right list, and where do things kind of fall on the list? So it's kind of helping go through a process of gaining clarity. Is this the list you all want to have? That's one step, and there probably needs to be other steps, especially if there's still a lack of clarity about some of what these items are.
We need more information. I mean, going back to the funding of, campaign funds and all that, I didn't even know we had 2 council members that were working on this.
Yeah. Okay.
And I have no idea, what they're going towards. Is it a state mandate? Is it a county mandate? Is it a city? What are they thinking? This all has to be clarified before I vote.
Yeah, so I guess kind of a thought for us all to think about, are you ready to do the top 5 or not? And that's up for...
Well, I think we could be.
Yeah.
But I think we need to have time to go back and say, okay, we need clarification
Okay.
on these different things.
So let's catch clarification as we go through them. So if you need additional clarification, we can go back and revisit items if we need to, but let's try and catch that as we go through them so we can have the discussion at one point for each. I'm going to give you an analogy on the level of understanding or level of information you might want to have here. So if we were to decide that we wanted a new playground at Los Animas Park, we could all perhaps get around the idea that, yeah, okay, we want that. But there's details involved in that, right? Well, what kind of program is it? What kind of playground is it? Does it have slides? Does it have swings? Does it have shade structure? What's involved with it? That's the difference between the sort of the details that we don't have today and the concept of, do we want a playground at Los Animas Park, right? So we want you at the concept level on these particular items for now, and then we'll flesh them out. And I think you've already started to identify areas where you want to have study sessions and dig in a little bit deeper ahead of time. That's great information for us because that tells us that you want additional information before it proceeds through staff work. So all of that's a great part of the conversation. So think about conceptual level is in concept, is this a high priority for me, or is in concept, does this fall down the list?
To expand on that, because I agree, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead. It's okay.
I guess my expectation, if we set these 5 and 5 in stone today, are they 5 and 5 in stone on Thursday?
The 5.
Or are we going to be, when it shows on the agenda, rolling up our sleeves or whatever on Thursday of next week, whenever it is, do those have an opportunity to shift as we go through that process?
They always have an opportunity to shift. You can always say, I hate it today and I love it tomorrow. That's fine. The 5 and 5 is simply to facilitate additional conversation. Okay. So if 7 council members rate something as a top item, it's important. That tells us as a council, I think that tells you a lot about that item. Likewise, if there's 7 that are at the bottom that say this is a bottom item, that tells us, and we should have a conversation about it. Does it mean it falls off the list? No. Does the schedule change? No. But maybe the council, as a council, decides that we need to remove an item from the list, or maybe not. Maybe they all stay there. We're fine with that. We just want to see if there's a trend in there, because there was no vetting process originally, right? It was just everything goes forward.
To Councilmember Mark's point, though, there are some data points that you do. I appreciate the playground example. I do. Okay, but if I extend your playground example and I say, guess what? We're having a huge community event in 6 months. Okay. It changes things because there's now a time factor involved. Or if there's a correlating thing that really goes with something, and they have to have that kind of information to understand. So when you look at something like campaign finance situation, there's clearly a time factor here involved. When you look at the LAFCO thing, if you asked anybody about the LAFCO thing and they didn't have really any kind of correlated information or understanding of that, then they could rate that a 3 on here. And if you then afterwards said, did you know that if we're going to do in the Gilroy Sports Park, Gilroy Ice, and we don't have LAFCO, every dollar that goes in there, we don't get any sales tax. Really? Yeah. Now it changes completely. So there is a certain level of information that everybody has to have an understanding in these things. I don't know how to get there, but I'm just saying it's not as simple as just what it is.
Well, I think we can get there by trust too, right? Because this forum is our playground, the electeds. right? The policymakers. And so when we adopted this, or I look at it as every 2 years when we adopt this, like this is our playground and this is where we're moving forward. Some items, and I even said this last year, some items won't move forward at all because the council member, the mayor that put that item on there is not going to do any work on it. They just literally put it on there as like a placeholder. But then there's some items where it is on here, which gives us authorization to work on it and work with staff on it, that we're going to go and we're going to put forth a good effort to go in there and do it. So for something like the campaign finance, ask questions. Me and Terrence did a lot of work around that. So ask questions on that. But I would say just give a level of trust on these two, that if you're not sure, well, it's okay to be not sure. There's plenty of these where I'm not sure either, like the unhoused one. I have no idea where that's going, but I know that the mayor and a couple of you guys are really focused on this. So I just trust it that you're going to take that somewhere. So I would say ask the questions, and this is a great time for the dialogue on it.
But it's hard to ask questions when you're working on a project that we don't know you're working on. So maybe.
No, but anything that's on here has moved forward at some point and been worked on.
Okay.
That's why why
right.
it's on here. So
Maybe I missed a council meeting, which I don't think I did, on when like the campaign funds were discussed by the council to say, hey, how do you guys feel about this?
Because it hasn't got there yet, and that's what he's going to bring. He's bringing that. I didn't even know it was coming forward either. But I'm saying the fact that this stuff got put on the work plan last year during the budget cycle, that's when council members can turn around and go to work on it. And that's what I've been doing on several of them, and on some of them we've teamed up on. So
I guess what's confusing to me, though, is if it hasn't been brought to the whole council, some of these topics, and what would happen if the council said, no, we don't want to go in that direction, or we don't want to do this? Did you just spend all those hours of working on something for nothing?
No, well, I never look at it like that.
Well, I mean, I would always assume that you would come forth and say, okay, this is what we're working on, and we all go, yeah, that's really great. We want more information on that.
I mean, the example to bring to you is that there's many, many months of you trying to work on the parking lot around the Los Animas Park.
Correct.
But it's never coming to council yet.
Yeah, you're not telling us about it.
Right? And then eventually you create a fair memo and it comes to council, right? Or eventually the city administrator would take that and say, yeah, that's really important. You don't need a fair memo. I'm just going to go put that on the agenda. And as far as this particular issue, just to have an understanding, I knew that the election was coming, that we changed into districts. Last year, I started talking to city administrator. I started talking to the interim city administrator. Nothing went anywhere because I actually read the city code and saw that there's massive ambiguity in this. I'm sorry I'm getting into it, but at least it's there. And so what happened then is the interim city administrator kicked it over to the city attorney, who said, I'll work on this and get back and figure out whether or not we have a problem or not. And that's pretty much it.
Oh, okay.
And so at that point, I think Matt, when he came in, saw this was happening and said, okay, this now has to be one of the things that we have on our list.
But it already was on the work plan.
But yeah, it's on the work.
That's what I'm saying. It was already on the work plan, which gave us the right to work on it. Matt just picked it up and put a date on it that, hey, okay, it looks like it's ready. Let's bring it forward to the council.
But do you want to jump in, Mayor? Or?
Well, I was just going to make one more comment from Councilmember Marks. I keep hearing from you saying that you didn't know about this, but we all voted on it. Right? Last year, we voted on the council legislative agenda, so that's why it empowers these guys to work on it. So I don't think this is behind the scenes at all. We voted on everything on this list.
If I could.
Just two comments. Yeah. One, before I forget, because this happens, I meant to mention something with regards to district elections, is that we need to update the charter, because the charter does not reflect district elections. So that's just something I want to throw out there. And I forgot already the second thing, because that happens.
I can tell you, and I can provide that update because we already looked into that, and I can provide the exact language. I believe Jolie might have been on that email that the city attorney already evaluated that, and I can send that so that way everybody can be on the same page from it.
If I could, just as I'm listening, you're doing great. This process tends to be a little messy, and so. The process of kind of getting clarity and getting on the same page, if we're going to use that that term, I think, as from the start, this is part of that process. So you're getting on the same page. And so it's an iterative process. I get there may be some angst around top 5, bottom 5, but I don't think what we're saying is that you're locked into, what was the statement? It's not set in stone. It's part of this process, and trust the process a little bit to kind of help us kind of hone in on what is the list and are we on the same page about what the list is and getting clarity on that.
I remember what my second thing is.
Okay.
This is a reason I have talked to the city, I've talked to the mayor and to Matt about, to your point exactly, I think that because of the Brown Act and because our time during council meetings is so limited, we don't get an opportunity to just have conversations. Hey, what are you working on? Hey, we're working on this, we're working on that. I would like to see us have, whatever it is called, study session, open meeting, whatever, once quarterly to just be able to say, hey, Terrence, what are you guys working on? What do you think is important? Just so we can have some conversation and get an idea of what we find is important, things that are coming up that maybe we want to, pursue or work on or whatever. But just to kind of catch up, that's...
Okay.
No, that's a very good point, because even, I agree with the mayor. Yes, we did vote on it. But then at the time, a lot of things went discretionary. And so when it goes discretionary and is put to the bottom of the list, it's out of my mind, because I don't think of it as actually going anywhere. And I'm hoping all this does change. Okay. So I agree with you. We just need to be kept abreast, because it's hard to argue for something when you don't have all the details.
Okay.
I just noticed we got rid of discretionary.
Yeah.
Nice.
All right, I'm going to...
It's still there.
Councilmember, I'm going to try and push this forward here.
I know you are, but I don't want to leave this lingering for the public either. So
Okay.
on January 9th, a memo got sent out to us, all of us on council members, when Harjot was the interim, of the final results. It was a memo that got sent to all of us about district elections, the same thing that me and Terrence were asking for. So just from looking up that thing and the terminology that, and Matt, I should probably send this to you since you didn't get it in January, but the term that he used in that memo to all of us was that the charter basically remains silent when it comes to districting. So there's no need for us to go out on the ballot to actually change the language.
All right, if it's okay, I'm going to move forward. I think we've covered in general, and I think it's specifically 7 and 8, so I'm moving on to line item 9 on mine, which is develop affordable housing policy ordinance related to, in the description, to affordable housing.
And we are, through our community development department, working on a regional collaborative. All of the planning managers get together on a regular basis to work on this. So there's a regional policy that we'll be able to utilize as a template for what we bring forward, and you can see the timeline and what the expectations are. So this would provide definition around inclusionary housing, essentially, for development. All
right, on mine, line item 10, evaluate the city's transient occupancy tax, TOT. So the description is council's work plan item to review and adjust city's existing TOT rate, which is one of the lowest in the county, and pursue it as a ballot measure at the November 2026 ballot.
This one's on the 1 yard line, right?
Okay. Excellent. All right, on my list, number 11, conduct fire service evaluation. And the description, complete a comprehensive fire service evaluation to assess staffing levels, deployment models, response time performance, station locations, fire apparatus, workloads, long-term capital and operational needs. The evaluation will provide a data-driven roadmap for future service delivery. Obviously, a massive amount of work.
Big project. I'd love to get insights on that scope of work and what that means to you as a council. This, in my mind, is a big body of work. As we embark upon it, I'd like to make sure that we're headed in the right direction. So any feedback that you have on this would be great.
I'll kick it off. So a lot of this got placed on the work plan based on the LAFCO service review, the fire service review that happened. And that independent party review and reviewed everything from response times to agencies around us and why you built a station here when we didn't expand the city there and all that kind of stuff. And in conjunction with all this is the MOU that we have with Local 2805 that is tied into that multi-year. And so it looks like, according to this, like they're negotiating now, but we're probably more than likely won't have this done by the time that they're finished. But we still have the same problem with recruitment and retention. A growing city where we're haven't even been able to open up Station 4. And there's really no, I know that we've tried to put the retention and that kind of policy into our MOU framework, and you'll probably get a taste of this around this next time negotiations. But I don't think we're still there being able to really evaluate all the jurisdictions that are around us, and especially with, one of the things that they talked about was regionalization. And that could mean annexation, it could mean consolidation. But we do also need to pay attention to and look at that now. Santa Clara County Fire took over South County Fire. They are our partner, basically responding to Eagle Ridge and areas on the west side of our city. And so they kind of are our Station 4. And there's technology built into their systems that might not be built into ours to make sure that the closest unit responds to a call. So these are the things that I'd like to see us look at. I know it's a heavy lift, and I wish that over the last year we had done maybe more work on it. But hopefully that'll kick off the conversation and enough feedback for you.
Yeah, I agree that I'd hoped it had been further along than this. It was in our strategic planning a key thing that we all discussed because we knew that the upcoming negotiations and work on that contract is coming, and the ability to have this influence or decide how we can go forward with more short-term plan until we get it or other things. So I really want, I really think we do have the focus here and see how this all dials into the other work plan item and whatnot that we have with fire services contracting. So it's important.
I agree. I think this is a huge priority. Referring to the LAPCO, they say we need to have 5 fire stations for the geographic and population of our city. We're building the 4th without any plans to staff it. We are grossly understaffed, and we need to not only bring staffing up, but we need to be competitive, and we need to look at all options. And I think that this study will give us an opportunity to look at what direction we need to go in.
I think the whole thing that got in the way is interim, and it's slowed us down for the since we adopted this to where we are today. So expectations are stretched because of that. So how we get there, it's not going to slow down what's going on day to day, and that's what we see with negotiations that are going to start happening with fire and how that impacts with this. So it's something we're trying to get the ball rolling, and that's the whole point of this.
Okay, I'm flipping the page on mine to line item number 12. And kind of similar to the last discussion, this is Police Department Service Level Evaluation and Strategic Plan. Conduct a comprehensive 3-year strategic plan. I won't read through the whole thing, but very similar. Appears like this one might be further along, but...
Yeah, so there is some progress on this one. It started with the team building that the command staff did 2 weeks ago, I think. And so that was the first step. So that's that milestone step that's sort of in the past. There is consultant support through Post to do the staffing assessment. So we're working in that direction already. It's important, obviously, from a public safety aspect to have this on the list.
Yeah, it's a little convoluted for me because I know part of this discussion that we had, but the beat structure discussion came up a few months ago as well. So in your description just there, that wasn't one of the things that you mentioned. So I know in terms of distribution of officers and staffing, and the beat structure itself was mentioned by prior police chief as part of the impediment to making any kind of major changes. And this is all from my own recollection, so that's the only feedback I have there, is that I don't know the milestones, so I don't know if that was a key thing.
I do believe, I do recall that, and I think that that should be a part of the study done. But again, we are grossly understaffed, and one of the I think the key responsibility of a city and our job is to make sure that we provide a safe community to our residents, and along with fire, we are, this is also true. We are understaffed. We need to be competitive, and we need to, I feel, place this as a priority so that we can ensure that we provide a safe community.
Okay, next item on my list, it's 13, beautification efforts for Gilroy Gateways, Highway 101 in Monterey. This action would beautify the Cloverleaf area at the 101 Monterey South interchange with median enhancements extending to the sports park entrance. Comments, questions, points of clarification there?
Only clarification of understanding is the involvement not just in design, but the scope, obviously including how we prioritize some of the enforcement, code enforcement, and create enforcement zones or hot zones or whatever it may be around this, is part of a key component of that. That's all.
Okay, next item, 14, project name Highway Cloverleafs Interchange Maintenance Responsibility. Highway 101 Cloverleafs are currently maintained by Caltrans. The City Council indicated an interest in assuming maintenance responsibilities in an effort to improve these gateway locations.
About this, we're not even going out cutting the grass, picking up the trash. I think that's where we need to start. Just going out with a weed eater and cleaning it up, hauling off all the garbage on the ground would make them look really a lot better.
100% agree, council member, and I would add to that the general public here in the city doesn't understand where the city responsibilities begin and end. And so I say both, okay? I'm not disagreeing with you at all. It's just when somebody drives, for instance, the road in Monterey and south into town underneath the overpass, nobody in the city really understands that that's ours now, but before it might have been Caltrans. And nobody understands that when they get off to go to In-N-Out and the grass is 4 feet high, that's not our responsibility to do that. And, oh, by the way, Caltrans will do it when they feel like it 6 to 8 weeks from now. So I think it all goes hand in hand, and we should have an understanding. We're not going to do it yet, but we should have an understanding, if we can take it over, what the cost would be and what the benefit would be.
I have noticed lately that Caltrans is out there a lot more with the jailbirds, and a lot of them, they're cleaning up the freeway and stuff.
I'll throw a little perspective, if you don't mind. This conversation came up last year when we were really struggling with action from Caltrans. So we just, a few of us on council, hope that's okay with everybody else, been working on this, spending a lot of time to build a relationship with Caltrans to make them hope that they oblige to doing what we believe that they're supposed to do. And this year, that's happened, right? So part of this, priority, it might just, like Councilmember Fugazi said, he just wants to know the options. Some of the options are, let's build some relationships with other agencies so they do what we think they're supposed to do.
And it's not just, by the way, it's not just the grass and the clover leaves. We also have the homeless abatement issues up under the overpasses that we can't take care of ourselves. It's a Caltrans thing. So, and what with the cycle, even as good as they get, right, we can have somebody else move in there right after they clear them out, and it'll take another 6 weeks for us to deal with that situation when the residents, when they drive through there every day, they don't even know that Caltrans went out and did anything about it. So us examining what we can do to help better mitigate that, I think, is a great idea.
I think that is a great idea also, and I appreciate all the time you spent talking, to Caltrans and getting this done. I think, it's just really nice for all of us on the council to know this is happening. And maybe when council gives their reports, they just mention in a sentence or two, this is what, I was working on this last week, because I think there's more power in numbers and we can all, get on board and support these things. And when we look at these priorities, we've hired a new economic development director. This is part of it. Any way you look at it, if you're going to try and sell your city, it needs to look good, and you need to present well. And if Public Works said, we're understaffed, we need more help, then that would be where council would look at it and say, this is one of our priorities, how do we help you get there?
Wow, council member, you just brought up a great point.
Oh, good.
Okay, which is economic development for the city is an overarching place and position, and I think it would be great when we're looking at how we want to direct some of these things, that we have the economic development department actually say, this is how I see the priority on many of these things, on how it's going to affect economic development for the city, because then we can take that into consideration, and it is across the board, whether it be a sidewalks or it's the gateways or whatever it is, and we can take that advice or their ranking into consideration.
This
Councilmember Hilton.
Sorry.
Thank you. I'm just patiently putting my hand up. I'm not trying to
I should be doing a better job here.
So just a couple of comments. So there is funds available through Caltrans. It's not, so I am supportive of this, and I want to see this move forward. We finally redid the maintenance agreement, and inside that maintenance agreement, we shortened it, consolidated it, and we ended up finding out that there's actually funds that Caltrans will say, that's great, go ahead, take it over. Here's $46,000 that you can expense every fiscal year, or whatever. I'm making that up. So that stuff does exist. So I want to continue seeing that. I appreciate the small teams that several of us have been teaming up on, and I appreciate Mayor jumping on that Caltrans talk. We had no idea, and I had no idea as a former four-year council member, that this group actually meets every 2 weeks, and they get staffers on there, electeds on there. And I think that is a direct testament of us just showing up and saying, hey, we expect better. We have high expectations of our city, and that shows that they're already out there doing that work ahead of time. So I do also believe too that we have high expectations for our contractors that are supposed to be out there, that we pay to maintain those medians, that we pay to maintain those spots. And I know the mayor's office has been looking into that as far as could we approve some of those contracts? And then I remember being talking about one of them saying well, just the same thing Bronco says every year, well, what about that median, man? That one tall weed that everybody notices in the world is getting taller and taller and taller. Who's going to go out there and pull it? Do you want me to do that? Or should someone else automatically be doing that? And so some of that work also relies back on our public works division, right? Our parks, which is completely understaffed. But I can tell you from testament for the last year that if you put something in See, Click, Fix, whether you're a council member or a member of the public, that parks team will clean it up. They will do it. There's no excuses. You can even let stuff linger for months. It will get done. And oftentimes we're so busy with other stuff that we need specific things like that to call it out. Thank you.
Councilmember Ramirez?
Sorry.
Just very quickly, the reason this all came up was when we were talking about economic development, and we said, in order to bring, to your point, Carol, businesses here, they want to be able to get off the freeway and drive into town and see that this is a place worth investing. So I think that, we should, have this kind of under the management of economic development. But it's almost like 13 and 14 can kind of be put together with, we're going to beautify all of our clover leaves, whether that's working with Caltrans, whether that's working with our own public works, whether that's working with a contractor that we've, a landscaper that we've contracted with, whatever, but kind of under the purview of economic development because it directly impacts economic development.
That's the whole idea why we did this, to get economic development person in place, and we've done that. Again, the whole interim thing, the time it's taken to get to this point, I think that's why we're doing this. I think I say to the mayor, the work he did in pushing Caltrans, you see the trees all trimmed as you're coming into town, and you didn't see that for the longest time. And so that's positive. And I would say a shout out to Public Works. I noticed yesterday, I believe it was yesterday, they were on that medium on Leasley getting that all cleaned up. So I know we are shorthanded at every level, and but it is good to see some of those things getting done. So appreciate that.
So just based on what I heard there, I do think this project description needs to be revised to kind of pick up on the nuances of this discussion that just happened here. This kind of description seems to imply there's a conclusion that you're going to start taking over. I mean, that's not what the discussion was about. So kind of revising that to kind of align it, I think. I haven't been commenting on many of these. This one hits super close to home for me. It's been a vast part of my career trying to get other agencies to do what they're supposed to be doing in our cities. And there's always this kind of movement where, well, if they can't do it, maybe we should take it over. And that's a slippery slope, I can tell you that. Whether it's Caltrans, whether it's Valley Water, whether it's the railroads, you go down the list, and it's a big effort. So I think it's great that it's on the list. It just needs to be kind of clarified a bit in terms of what your intentions are. All right, just two more on our list. Item 15, update the Parks and Trails Master Plan. This project will develop a Parks and Recreational Trails Master Plan to guide city staff on the life cycle, needs, and replacement for parks facilities. Any questions or comments? Everyone's okay? Okay, good. And the last one on this list is item 16, Downtown Rule 20A undergrounding. This project will underground a total of 5 poles and associated overhead utilities along Monterey between 8th and 10th, utilizing banked PG&E Rule 20A credits.
Well, I have a question. It said here that credits typically equal approximately 50 cents on the dollar. Additional city funding will likely be required to implement. For me to make a judgment call on this particular one, I would need to know how much money we're talking about that the city would have to put in. I like the idea of using these credits. However, what's the price tag?
And it's a great question. The Rule 28 program in general from PG&E is a little upside down right now in terms of what they want to do with it and what the CPUC is telling them to do with the undergrounding process. We do have a district in this area, which is sort of the first step in locking in funds. So we have the ability to do that. PG&E funds just don't go a long way. The credits don't go a long way. We are due to bring this to you in July, so we'd have that discussion then. So I think really the conceptual level is this still a priority to begin an undergrounding process through the downtown?
So I have a question. Since it's going to say this does not make the top 5 and it goes to the bottom, are we still going to discuss it in July? Because I still would like to know more about this. I mean, what do you say?
So the top five at this moment, it doesn't necessarily tell us anything other than it's worth a discussion. So let's get those numbers in and see where they land. If it's in the bottom 5 by a lot of council members, then let's talk about it and see if it still belongs on the list or if it should fall off. So let's come back to it in just a few minutes.
Okay.
So I think, have completed this part of the process, and I think we are now going to ask you all to do the top 5, bottom 5 if you can.
Let's do public comment.
Okay.
I don't think we probably have any speaker cards.
Yep. Yes, we do.
Oh, great.
Gary Walton and then David Leal, please.
And do they normally come here?
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you. So last week, I read an article that was written about downtown Morgan Hill. And it kind of bothered me that there was so much talk about downtown Morgan Hill, even within Gilroy. If you listen to the comments online, it's always about Morgan Hill. And I was thinking about Gilroy, and I wrote this letter, and I talked about how the bones of Gilroy are actually superior to those of Morgan Hill. But yet, this article said that downtown Morgan Hill is Morgan Hill. But downtown Gilroy is not Gilroy. If you've read any of the comments online about downtown, they're majority negative comments. That's a problem. When your community doesn't like itself, that is a problem, and it needs to be dealt with. So I sent out a letter to Amber. I think Dave was on there. I think you were on there. And kind of some things that we could do. And so I was thinking about it a little bit more. And what's in it for Gilroy? Community pride. How do you put a value on that? But the other thing I looked at, cities like Palo Alto, Campbell, Los Gatos, Morgan Hill, and Gilroy. And on the list, we have the lowest tax revenue of any of those downtowns. Morgan Hill is twice what ours is, but what percentage of that are people going from Gilroy to Morgan Hill to spend their dollars there? So there's a huge opportunity because of what we have, and I outlined that in the letter, of all the issues that we actually exceed Morgan Hill. And so the gap is for Gilroy is about $2.5 million or $21,000 per acre versus peers, the cities I mentioned, $5 to $10 million in sales tax revenue and $50,000 to $80,000 per acre in sales tax. So the opportunity, matching Morgan Hill, doubles the revenue for the city of Gilroy. Matching Campbell triples it. So Morgan Hill, and I was active up there, that didn't happen by chance. That was intentional investments by the city over a long period of time. And, you know, that's just what it takes. There's a return on investment that will exceed what you invest. Besides the monetary, but community pride. But you got to have a plan. The last plan, and I was chair, we adopted that in 2005. We have no plan. And I have some, over the last 20 years or so, I kind of have done enough study and enough learning that we made some mistakes on that plan. And I think there needs to be discussion about, you know, what kind of plan, who's going to be responsible, what the timeline is. But we need to do that sooner than later. So I'd like that to be a main part of the work plan coming up, because it needs to be discussed and it needs to be acted on.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
I think Dave is next.
Good morning. A lot of stuff that Gary just said about the downtown. So I just want to, first of all, thank a lot of people on the city council for doing what you've done in the last 2 years. It's gotten a lot better. I feel positive. We have some new restaurateurs coming into town, some others that want to. And so I feel really positive about what's going on. And I just think we need some more help on defining on what the vision is for downtown and getting more help on some of the ordinance that we had put in place just recently, and now we were forgotten about them, and now they're kind of coming back, and people are talking about it, and it's not good. So I hope that we can work on that and maybe getting some more policing or fire or whatever down there to kind of clean up the area and just make it just more of a welcoming place for these new visitors to come to town, because there are people that do want to come here, and I just feel like we're going to miss an opportunity if it's not addressed soon. And like we say, there was an article on the Facebook of why people aren't coming to Gilroy and why they are going to cities north of us. And that's a lot of money. That money could pay for the fire, for police, for public works. I mean, over a 5-year period, millions of dollars. And I just feel like right now we have a really good, solid team, all of you guys out there, and some building and business owners that are committed to making the place better. And I just hope that that's a priority. Our downtown it's a very small section, from 3rd to 7th, if you want to call it. And I think that just consistent eyes on it from the city to make sure that we can just maintain. And like I said, I think we just have so much potential, and that's what everyone says. Oh, you have so much potential. So why are we missing this, you know? And obviously it's a funding thing, but if we could figure out a way to get some money to clean it up, whether it's the P-bid, which I would love to see happen down there. I've been to cities south of us, north of us. They have the P-bid, and they're successful. So that might be something that we could hopefully get going, because obviously there's funds there for that. And once again, I just want to say thank you for what you guys do.
Thank you, Dave.
I do have one additional speaker, Amber Atterbury.
Hello. So I chair the Gilroy Downtown Business Association. So I just wanted to provide some stats real quick for you to kind of take into consideration when you're deciding on priorities. So for economic impact and tax revenue, downtowns generate up to 10 to 20% of the city's total tax revenue. And that's despite being occupying a small geographic footprint. Secondly, foot traffic equals revenue. So a study by Smart Growth America found that walkable downtowns drive up to 80% of higher retail sales compared to car-dependent areas. And then property value is at a premium. So they higher property values, around 30 to 50%, are around vibrant downtown districts. And then events and placemaking return on investment. On event days, businesses downtown make 10 to 30% more than on regular days. And lastly, vacancy reduction and business stability. Targeted downtown revitalization programs can reduce vacancy rates by 15 to 25% within a few years. So there's a few key areas that I would love for you guys to prioritize today. That would be public safety and cleanliness. We have heard from some of the downtowns that public safety has been a little bit of a concern in the nighttime. So focusing on maybe some patrolling, things like that, working with the police department on that, as well as economic development and vacancy reduction, finding ways to provide some incentives for businesses to come in and, come into a place that's been vacant for a while. How do we activate these places, even if it's a temporary solution, just trying to make things a little bit more vibrant so that we get others to be excited about our downtown area, and then helping with the marketing and branding in downtown as well. We want to make it safe. We want it to be family friendly. And so just helping us spread that message and that branding through collaboration with the downtown organizations and businesses. And that's it. Thank you.
Thanks, Amber.
I have no further speakers.
So I think, Matt, we were now going to do the
Yeah,
top
so
five.
you have the sheets in front of us, in front of you. What we're going to do is there's two columns there, a left column and a right column. The top five and the bottom five. 5 checks or X's, your choice in each. I'll gather them up, and then we'll take a 10-minute break, so you get your break in at the same time. We'll do a little tally, and then we'll have a conversation about it. We're not locking anything in stone. It's for a conversation. Questions?
Just a quick question. For example, the TOT, that's coming to us in a couple of weeks. We've done an enormous amount of work. If it doesn't show up on top 5, it doesn't stop the process.
None of this is all for conversation. None of this is going to determine whether something stops or not.
Matt, here you go.
Okay, we're going to call this meeting back to order. I just received information from Councilmember Ramirez. She has an appointment meeting in San Jose that she needs to get to, so we don't want her to miss that meeting. So out of respect to her, we're going to try to get this meeting going. Again, you're going to get a tally sheet from Matt here in a moment.
You're my alternate, so if I somehow get sick or something.
With that said, I have nothing to say. Sorry, I need Matt or Dave to take it from here. Sorry.
Take like 30 seconds to take a look
Yeah.
through it. So I will just put the caveat that I did have 3 other lines at the bottom. I didn't talk about them because, streamlined conversation. One council member did pick up on that. So we have a line 17 now with a 1 on it. And there were a couple council members that refused to limit themselves to 5. So they did some combinations to garner an extra 1. But it's all fair. It's just for conversation. So. I saw where you combined. I'm the one you're calling out. I wasn't going to call you out by name, but it seems. Yeah.
So this is almost like an impromptu.
So, I don't know, Dave, do you want to?
Yeah, so what are we
trends here?
seeing from this? I guess, acknowledging kind of the fact that we had 2 items that were kind of combined, but in terms of some items that got a lot of votes for top 5, one is item number 5, evaluation of the annexation of the Gilroy Sports Park. So that got 5 votes.
Are we able to put this on the slide? That way the members of the public that are going to watch
Excellent point.
10 years later can see what it is. That's a softball pitch for me.
1 minute on that.
We can start the conversation.
Yeah.
Dave, and we'll catch
So
up.
that one got 5. Item 12 got 4. Police Department Service Level Evaluation and Strategic Plan. The next item, 13, got 5 votes. Beautification efforts for Gilroy Gateways. So those were the big winners. Oh, sorry, I missed over on number 11. Got 7 votes. Conduct fire service evaluation. So those are the big ones.
So let's pause there and see if there's any feedback or thoughts on the top 5 conversation.
So the top 4 were item 5, evaluate the annexation of Gilroy Sports Parks. Number 11, conduct fire service evaluation. Number 12, police department service evaluation. And number 13, beautification efforts on Gilroy Gateways. Those were the big vote getters. Does that resonate with people?
I would just say it is what it is. I mean,
Okay.
I mean, I wouldn't necessarily say that you end up taking these 4, like we already said, that nothing's getting canceled out and everything has got a different parallel path to it. But if this helps admin in a snapshot, then I hope it was beneficial. I don't know, maybe, what did you want to get out of this?
Yeah. Really, it's just an extension of the conversation. So it tells us a lot on where your priorities lie, so that's helpful. I'll definitely bring this back and have conversations with my executive team about it, and we'll see to what extent it informs us. But like I said, all of these items are moving forward concurrently, so that I think if there's discussion points or trends that you see that are educational, we want to point them out. Maybe on the bottom 5, there might be something that pops out. So if you look at the ones that had big numbers there, looks like the climate action plan and vehicle miles traveled didn't resonate quite so much.
So can I just interject for a minute, just for my own understanding, as we move forward, providing direction, to your point, conversation about, going back to staff and providing direction. Ultimately, I would think that if you take this and you've identified the top 4 that they, especially when it comes to beautification of the gateways, for example, you come back and you're going to say, okay, this is a $5 million price tag. Is it still a priority? Or, something like that. These are the resources that we're going to need. This is the realistic time frame, that type of thing. So we've got to, do we want to reevaluate that type of thing? Or, VMT, there's going to be a $5 million penalty associated if we don't get it done by this time, whatever. And then the second thing would be, when you came on and you had a contract, we're supposed to create your personal objectives. And isn't that part of what we're doing as well? So that at the end of the day, we're going to have your objectives, measurable objectives at the end of this.
At the end of next week.
At the end of this process.
At the end of the process.
Okay.
At the end of the second meeting.
Yeah,
That-
not today,
that's the goal.
right. But that's kind of where we're going with this conversation. Am I correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
So I wanted to validate and make sure that I had all of the right information going into that conversation, and that we had a chance, because it was one of the housekeeping items, that we'd had a chance to talk about the legislative agenda as a group, so that we as staff could understand where you as council are and make sure that we're.
Yes, Councilmember.
On the bottom 5 side, when it comes to things that are mandated, and back to the discussion of what does mandated mean, right? I think in looking at these results, I think you can have an understanding that my point of saying minimal necessary is resonating on a couple of these, and that's where I think you can come back and say, hey, we think there's all of these things, but you guys weren't so receptive to actually making this thing a priority. We have to make it somewhat of a priority because of the timeline and the mandate and whatnot. So here's the minimum thing, right? Because you guys weren't, and we can get this done and off of our work plan and move on to something else. So I think that's what I see as indicative in the results here.
Yes, Councilmember.
Another thing that drives me to that was listed in a lot of the items that drive me to put items on the legislative work plan was, what came out of the general plan, the 2040, right? That was the will of the voters. That was the will of the people. All those organizations, businesses, commerce, electeds, everybody that put the time and effort in it just said that this is where we want you to go. And here's where we want you to implement. That guides a lot of these decisions. So while some of them might not be mandated, like someone telling you, you shall. When I read the general plan, I look at as like from the people and from those that approved that plan in 2020, that this is the direction we want you to go until there's another general plan process. Stick to this game plan.
And that is direction, and then councils interpret the direction. And then we can decide at kind of what level we think meets that. And so there's the mandates that come out of that, quote unquote mandates, and then there's the mandates that come out of Sacramento or wherever else. And understanding how we navigate that with these legislative items and the work plans that come out of them and the feedback that come back to us to make decisions, I think that's where it was a good idea to do this kind of process, because now you really can get an idea, and everything that fits down the middle is where people are like, hey, whatever it says on there, it's kind of okay, or what have you, and these are the ones that are contentious. That's the other thing it tells you by looking at that. These are the ones which are very much, okay, these are a slam dunk. Yeah, everybody's going to want this assessment, or everybody, hates undergrounding. Okay, so yeah, it's really good, and I think it was a great exercise.
Just if I could, since we did summarize the 4 that got the top votes, there are, I think, 4 items that got the most votes to be on the bottom. Those were line item 7, climate action plan, line item 8, develop VMT and TDM, item 9, develop affordable housing policy ordinance, and item 16, downtown Rule 20A undergrounding.
Also interesting, if you look at number 14, highway cloverleafs, there was sort of 2 that thought that was super important, 2 that didn't necessarily, right? So probably informative for me and for you all, right? That there's not a solid consensus one way or the other necessarily on that.
But we also talked about joining those two things, and they're really kind of like in the same world. So somebody might not have wanted, like me, might not have wanted to waste one of their ones by putting it on the second one and only put it on the first one because they considered them the same.
To me, the beautification efforts for Gilroy Gateways covered the clover leaves.
Yeah, gotcha. Yeah. So again, it's information, not driving the direction necessarily. Interestingly, if you look at things like the Climate Action Plan and the develop VMT policy, those are things that so they were identified by you as a priority at some point. So they're on your list. Even if they weren't on your list, they would be on our list, right? And we'll talk about that in a minute and what our list looks like, because they're things that we need to be doing and we need to have in place as a city. So it's just a different level of focus, but still something that we would likely be working on.
But to be fair, Matt, when we did this last time, before your time, anything that was basically suggested by a council person got put on, and there was no discussion, and we didn't rank them. So maybe whoever put an item on, whatever it was, might have just been the only person in support. I don't want you thinking that there was council discussion and we all voted and said, yeah, this is what we want to do. That didn't happen.
And some of the stuff was put on by two council members.
Good point.
I want to bring up one other item, and I've spoken to the city administrator about this before, is trying to come up with a practice, because one of the things that's not on this list anymore that says was completed was the ADU ordinance. And as we know, when we choose to have certain ordinances, we don't have to have an ADU ordinance. We could just rely on whatever, the state says, right? And that makes it a lot easier. But when we want to be specific on ordinances like our SB 9 ordinance, ADU ordinance, and other things, if we're not cleaning the language up and making those corrections every January, they're null and void anyways. And so, yeah, we did complete the one that just came before us, but I don't think we've implemented 2026 stuff that went into current law in January. So maybe you can speak to that, whether that's something that you think should be on this, or that's something that literally we can push over to your office and say, hey, we've seen this work well in other agencies. I've seen this work well in agencies. Every January, we're going to try to do some sort of cleanup through our entire city code that literally is just like an item saying we're going to clean up this language, this language, this language. And it's not something we have to try to fight for to put on our legislative plan.
Yeah, I think the legislative plan is sort of raising things to a different level, right? So when the state puts a law in place that we need to comply with and we need to adjust our code to, we're going to do it. We'll put it on sort of our work program and move through it. So that's stuff that will happen. If you want to boost it to a different level, then you put it on the legislative work plan. If you want to do new ideas associated with what your priorities are, those would go on the legislative plan. Some of these items, it's sort of a belt and suspenders thing, right? So if you want it on the legislative plan and in a CIP, or legislative plan and in our work plan, that kind of a thing, it just brings it to a different level for your attention and sort of carries a message to us as well. But it's not necessary. Just a level of significance associated with it. That does bring, so another way that the ranking will help us is ultimately, so we look at the strategic, the legislative agenda as a two-year process, right? So we're sort of mid-cycle on that. You set it up a year ago, and we're halfway through it now. Next year, we'll start a little bit of a bigger refresh on it and take a look at it there. But there's an acknowledgement that things change over the course of 2 years. We like to be able to focus on something for 2 years and really work through it and try and chunk it off, but priorities change, right? So there's going to be times where you're going to ask to put something on the legislative work plan that maybe not there, and having a ranking will help us to say, okay, we can add this in. Here are the items that could feel an impact because of that, right? And we use the information from this conversation today to help guide us in what that would be. It would be a conversation, of course, but hey, if you want to add an item to your legislative agenda, great, let's do that. Here are the ramifications associated with that if we were to do it.
I just wanted to add one thing, because he brought up the ADU and saying we could have something or we could use what Sacramento, and in light of, the downgrading that we had, for instance, on the affordable housing thing, is another example of that would be like local rent control, right? There's state level rent control. When you're starting to look at how you're going to put together stuff for affordable housing for us, and you come back from your group meeting with everybody up north and they're all gung-ho on rent control, you may come here and go, we thought, but then we thought this is, you guys aren't really, because that's a perfect example, I think, of how to mold this stuff and to bring it down. One last thing I want to add is that there isn't something on here that isn't, I think, yet on the CIP, and it's not on here. Is that going to come up for discussion or not? Some major project in the city? Or I don't think it is. The resurfacing under the Monterey in the south end of the city, the 101, I don't believe that was a previous CIP approval, and
It's in our annual street maintenance program, I believe. John's going to stand up and yell at me if it's not, but I believe it's in our annual street maintenance
it is,
program
okay.
for
So it's been added to that? Okay. Because I thought it was a large budget need that needed to come before us. Thank you.
Okay, so we okay moving forward? You got what you need, Matt? We okay? So next, we were going to touch base on the departmental work plans. There's a lot on this, and the plan was not to go through these items item by item. I think, Matt, you were going to prompt a few just to kind of, for awareness sake, I guess. So if we got time, we can do that now.
So this is the document where I have numbering issues. So I'm going to reference two different numbers depending on the version. If you picked a copy up off of my desk, you're going to have a different versioning number than otherwise. And that's because it's the nature of the document. It's a working document, and we fiddled with it along the way. So the first one I want to talk about is the school's speed limit reduction project. It's item number 5 or number 10, I think, on your list. So pick one of those two. So some folks it's going to be 5 likely, so it won't be consistent. So just wanted to point out that we've added this to the work program. We're working on it actively, and we'll be bringing it to you shortly to have a discussion about. So this is just showing and demonstrating a little bit of us looking for solutions and being a little bit nimble in our actions. So something that was all of a sudden an issue, and through discussions we've identified an opportunity to act on this particular one. So action.
Can I make one comment on that?
Please do.
And I made this comment to you yesterday. If we could also, it says all public schools, if we can do all schools in Gilroy?
Yeah, so we'll bring an assessment of what, because there's some nuances with the state law that allows this, so we'll bring an assessment of what we can do and what our limitations are. And we'll make sure that reach out broadly.
So this is a perfect example when I look at estimated completion date. First of all, I hate the word estimated. This is the completion date. We'll change it later on if we have to. But what does that mean in this particular instance? Right? Yeah, does this mean signs are up everywhere, they're operating, so that's the context that need to have this, right? Because it's not necessarily clear all the time,
yeah,
in all of these.
And so it may have got cut off on yours as it did in mine, but the last sentence in the status says installation of new signage is estimated to completed on 12/31. So that gives you sort of the wrap up of that. But yeah, this particular item, and to your point, yes, you need clarity on what completion means on individual items, because some of them will be establishing a policy or an ordinance, and some of them will be actually implementation, and there's two different things there. So I get the nuance.
What is the reticence to want to say completion date versus estimated completion date? Because it just seems like I get that the completion date can change, right? But it just seems so wishy-washy whenever I look at that. The completion date is by the end of the year, we're going to have these signs up. And then there's an update in 3 months because something happened. And now the new completion date is this date with the footnote.
I'm going to comment on that if you don't mind. I'll just give my perspective. Like in my world, it's, from the construction standpoint, there's so many variables that will change an estimated completion date, and maybe that's why our staff is having a hard time, or will have a hard time giving us a hard date. There's got to be, I think they think there's got to be some exceptions, that there's so many changes every single day that might affect an estimated completion date, and now that they're going to have to update every single line item every single time there's a slight change on the date. So maybe there's a happy medium to be found here.
Yeah, and yeah, you know, we'll get to, I know probably where you're going to. The other part of that too then is that I want to evaluate everybody, okay, who's in the food chain as to how well they make those estimates, because to use your analogy, right, if you estimate wrong and you go long on a project, yes, you couldn't know that it wouldn't go long. But if you think that you're not going to make your customer unhappy, you're crazy. So it behooves you as part of your professionalism to be able to create a completion date that is as best as you know it can be. And if you put estimated, then at the end of the period, the quarter, the year, whatever the period is, I want to see what the delta is on every one of your estimated completion dates and your actual completion dates. And that delta becomes a part of the evaluation of whoever that is, because you have to be able to at least pad in what you know are these unknowns. And then there's some unknowns past it.
When you look at things that are capital projects, we look at them initially as a concept, right? And there's a limited definition and scope, a limited definition on cost and timeline. So we look at it as this sort of broad range of possibilities, right? We could narrow the scope really tight through the project development, and it could happen really quick. Or we could broaden the scope through the project development, and it could stretch it out. So at the front end, there's a lot of unknowns, and as you get closer and closer to, like in the capital project analogy, to issuing bid documents for it, you start to refine that number and those dates a lot, right? And so once you issue bid documents, you've got some assuredness in where things are going to line out. But until that point, you haven't defined your scope of project completely, right? So
That's okay too. You can have stages too, and you can have the first stage being this is when we estimate, and this is the cutoff when now we know enough that this is this is when it's going to get done, and then moving along. It seems to me like, when you're installing software and it says it's going to take 3 minutes to finish, and then it gets 80% of the way through and it still says 3 minutes, and at the end it's always right? It's finished. But, but it's been changing all along, and I want to know how we can.
So it brings in the conversation a little bit of do you encourage stretch goals in the numbers? So do we push and have those dates be tight so that we're striving to achieve them, or do we pad them so that we have room for unforeseen circumstances, right? My commitment to the staff as we were developing this was put a hard date in there, right? We had a conversation about what could we do, 4 seasons, and use that as a completion date, so it becomes a little bit more nebulous in terms of when the date is. And I pushed hard to have a set date, pick a number and put it on the chart, knowing that as we refine, as we get along in a project or in the effort, that these numbers are going to fluctuate, and we're happy to track them. Well, we can, as simply as putting a strike through the current one and the new date below it. So you have a series of dates there that tell you how we've been doing and what the adjustments have been.
And that's what you do on our agenda matrix, which is really helpful. That's right, it moved from here to there. It's like, I think more detail is.
So there's an advantage operationally to allowing for some flexibility, still having accountability, but having some flexibility and allowing these things to float just a little bit.
Yeah, this conversation's a good conversation. Just about every city has it, that cone of unknown, and coming to an agreement on what that scope is, and then setting that baseline schedule and measuring yourself against it, recognizing there's going to be changes from time to time, but there needs to be some level of accountability. Back to Matt's point, though, you don't want to be in a place where the staff is putting too much cushion into these schedules, and so I did a lot of work with another agency that won't be named that always seemed to meet their schedule, but that's because they had so much cushion in their schedule. They were inevitably always going to be able to meet it. So got to find that fine balance that works for all of you, that you're holding people accountable, you're being accountable, but you're also producing the results that you want.
In a vacuum, that's great, but we have a public and we have, there's interdependencies with businesses and all of these other things. And so them getting something as close to being what the estimate is because of that interdependency. And I get Greg's point as well that, you don't know everything, right? And it moves along, but you've got to get to where it's not 6 months down the road. It's not Gourmet Alley, right? Kind of a thing.
Okay, good. Yep, Matt.
Just a couple more. So the line number 20 or 37, depending on your document, which is customer and service enhancements to Gilroy Connect. So we're working on this currently. We're doing a benchmarking analysis now to see what other jurisdictions are doing in terms of timeline. So interesting feeds right back into the conversation we just stepped out of, which is establishing expectations and timelines on how we get work done and benchmarking it to what other agencies are doing. Then taking a look at it and seeing how that fits for us. And so we'll want to have those conversations. I think in this particular case, over time, I'd like to see what our numbers are, what our ability is to complete within our benchmarks, and then where we have gaps to be able to have those conversations, right? In order to, if we're at 50% completion by our target completion date, then let's figure out what we need in order to get to 75%, something like that, and what the process improvement looks like.
And whether or not there's an agreement on council with the expectation level anyway, right? So if we have hey, an SLA for graffiti abatement on public property versus private property, and it's 7 days and 30 days, and get the feedback on that of, well, you'd love it to be in 2 days, here's what it is. If you want to have it in 2 days, this is what's going to cost you. I think that's this process. I don't know if it's in this work plan item or not, but that's, I think, where you really start to refine for the city where we are, what we think that the residents through us have an expectation. That's a reasonable expectation. And if there's a delta that we need to come up with, clearly Councilmember Bracco here is like, look, drive down the street, there's weeds up to here, should there be an expectation when we get, a report of weeds in the city property that it takes 7 days or 72 days? And if we think it's gonna be 7, okay, here's pay up, where are you gonna get the money?
Interesting that a lot of these items on the department work plan will be things that we work on, we start, we finish, we complete, we put in the books, and they're finite in timeline, so they're done, right? And we'll talk about the work plan with you on a regular basis, but not necessarily something that would come to council, but there are some that will, and I would expect that Gilroy Connect is one that we would have that conversation. Time-wise, doing good. The other area that I think you'll notice, so the work plan was also in your budget document when you adopted the budget last year. So this is something that you've had access to over time. But we have added some new items in there. And so you'll see on the left column, there's some flags for new items, the items that weren't in there when it was added, when it was put into the budget. So we consider this a living document, and it continues to evolve over time. Items fall off, they go onto our completed list that we talked about at the beginning of the meeting, and new items take their place, and we figure out where they're going to go in the work plan based on sort of prioritization internally. With that, you approved, and we hired an economic development director, and so you'll see that there's quite a number of new economic development items on the work plan. So we're working through those. I wanted to point that out to you, so you have awareness on that. And then two that keep me up at night. One is our zoning code and the challenges we have with our zoning code and the need to get into that zoning code and update it. And we've been looking at a wholesale update, and it's predated, I think, every staff member in the room, basically, this desire to update this, and we just haven't been able to get traction on it. So one of those things that keeps me up at night, and I just thought I'd daylight that there are things we struggle with, right, in terms of getting momentum, and that's one that's, whenever there's a priority, it goes in front of the zoning plan, and the zoning plan slips down in time, and our ability to dedicate resources to make it happen. So a big priority for me is to get that done. Of course, competing priorities always seem to factor in. And then the last one that sort of keeps me up at night is county-driven changes that are impacting us. And this is happening across the organization as the county has restructured. So I attribute it to the county restructuring how they've done their cost allocation plan. Cost allocation plan is how they spread the costs of the non-direct services across everything else that they provide service for. So if you look at just the county exec, right, a portion of his time gets billed to everything. County does a lot of hospital work, so some of it gets billed to hospitals. County does fireworks, so some of it gets billed to fire. Over the last year, given their budget challenges, they've relooked at that. They would argue that they're right-sizing it. We might argue differently. But we've seen significant costs, and it's not just us in Gilroy. It's other organizations throughout the county that receive services from the county. We see it in our animal care services, right? The costs have gone up tremendously. We see it in our weed abatement services where costs have gone up tremendously. And we see it in police and fire, dispatch, and emergency response. And so the dynamics are changing significantly, and we expect and anticipate additional cost changes to that as time goes on. So we have a number of items in here related to that, especially around public safety that we're working on, that just sort of putting on notice that keeps me up at night, and it's something that we'll have conversations on and will be an impact to us and how we deliver services in the future. Yep.
Are you working with other cities to come up with maybe a different plan?
Yeah, so great question. So as there are options that we identify where we can do that, certainly we will. Also, as we look at other outsourcing opportunities, so the fire service delivery analysis is one. It's, okay, how certain are we about these costs and the longevity of the costs that we see when we're doing that analysis, right? So the example that comes from my previous employment was that they received county service from the sheriff's office, right? 1 year the cost went from $19 to $14 million, so a 33% increase in costs for service, all because of a cost allocation program, right, that changed the numbers. So significant 30% increases on the service that the county provides, and we're seeing it across multiple services, multiple things that they receive. So yes, we will look at alternate services, but they're not small undertakings, right? If we were to do animal care separately, we would look south. We would look to other nonprofits that might be interested, but nobody's really close. So we would have to maybe stand up our own. So what are the costs associated with that in terms of facility, managing it, and infrastructure to make it happen? And so are we sort of between a rock and a hard place on these conversations where we don't have great options? So just building awareness, we'll absolutely do the analysis on it and bring back options.
All right, you okay, Matt?
I think so. I think I left us on a downer.
Well, we had one more slide to cover in the slide deck.
Yeah.
I think I have back control over this. Nope, there we go. I'm sorry. Anyways, the last topic was really kind of setting the stage for next Thursday. And so next meeting, we're hopefully going to get into a discussion around kind of how do we measure success here. Yep, there we are. Good. What ideas do you have? Maybe do a little brainstorming right now. How many items do you want to have that we are measuring? How do we define success? How do we gather input? In my mind, there's kind of 5 things that you tend to measure in government life and even in the private sector: the cost, the quantity, the quality, timeliness, and then for us in the public sector a lot is a 5th one that's it's not so tangible, but it's public opinion and community opinion. Obviously, we often try and find that out through surveys, but To me, cost, quantity, quality, timeliness, and community opinion are factors that you might want to consider in terms of how do we measure success. So any thoughts leading into next week about what you'd like to see?
Yeah, I think the measurable part is obviously super important, that you have an objective kind of number that people can buy into, and in my opinion, it can flow down through an organization so it's understood. And I mentioned some of these things already in terms of timeline hitting and where those your estimates of that. I think in the economic development sphere, and specifically around our shortcomings right now in sales tax revenue, that sales tax revenue growth is absolutely something that we can track. It's directly attributed to how the city is doing, how it's attracting people to the city, how it's making services available, how it's doing events, or how it's doing whatever it happens to be. And it's one of the most vital things that we have to do any of the other work that we do. So I know it's uncomfortable, and I know anybody, when they're outside, again, to bring the professionalism into it, I come from sales and marketing, and nobody likes to own up to a number, okay? I can assure you that, okay? And every one of your reports in sales or whatever will say, yeah, but what happens if this happens, or what happens if that? And that's all for real. But you have to own up to a number, and then you have to see whether or not you can get there. And sales tax is going to be the same thing. Hey, maybe people aren't buying as many cars, or maybe they're not doing that. We don't know, but it's something. It's a signpost that we can head towards. Mayor.
One of the things that I think we've talked about over the past year and a half or so is some of the conversation around our HR. You know, some conversations we had and concerns are about, in the past, the amount of turnover at our city. And I think that should be part of our measurable goals moving forward for our new city administrator, to see if there's I don't even know what the word is, a baseline of turnover. Mm-hmm. And is there a way to get that down? Because I believe that's associated with cost. You get that down, you get costs down that are associated with turnover.
And associated with that is time to hire. So there's the lag time, basically, between having an opening and bringing somebody on board. And because that obviously affects the overall availability in whatever department it is, of do we need 10 head count, or do we need 9 head count, or do we need 11, because we have to account for that churn that you're talking about, along with the extended amount of time we have to get the rehire.
Anyone else? Time to get out of here?
I have a question still, if we're done with that.
Sure.
So one thing that I've a little bit have been wondering about as we came into this meeting is that, we did this prioritization conversation, but one thing that happened over the past year that I think was a lot related to the fact that we had some transition, quite a bit, with the interim city administrator. So what we talked about today was mostly the legislative work plan of council, and then we talked a little bit about the department work plans. But if you went back to that pyramid that you had earlier, the biggest section on that pyramid that you talked was the day-to-day. And so if someone was a beginner and you left here today, you would think the council has no interest in the day-to-day. But for better or for worse, I think we did. And so, if someone who was the city manager of a very, very large city with 10 council members, am I right at your time?
And a mayor.
Yeah, and a mayor. So we're guilty.
Yeah.
If that's the right word, and I'll just I'll use me as an example, because someone talked about it earlier about the landscape part. That's the industry that I come from, so that's my natural interest, right? From my professional background, my personal interest, is I do like beautification, right? And I'll give you an example of what happened last summer. So when we had an interim last summer, as an interim, he was very surprised about how much interest, I'll use that term, that some of us council members had in certain things on day-to-day. And at one point, he said to me, Mayor, why are you guys so involved on the day-to-day? right? And at that time, I and Hilton mostly, we were involved on the Caltrans cleanup of our 101 corridor from Maston Road to Monterey. And it was a disaster. And I said back to him, you tell me why I'm so involved. Right? Because it wasn't getting done.
Yeah.
Right? So, and I understand the balance that we have to strike, that just because it wasn't getting done, maybe I should stay out of it. But man, it's hard. It's hard to stay out of it.
And, that's not what we're saying, though. Your role is to hold us accountable. So you can ask that certain outcomes be met. How we get there, that's the part that give the city administrator and the team space to do it. But holding accountable that it needs to be done, that is completely your realm. And so if you see it's not getting done, it's completely fair to ask, why isn't this getting done? How can you get it done? I think that's the kind of the line there. So yeah, we're not asking you not to hold us accountable, but give us a little space to get the work done. And it's kind of that. I don't know if that helps, but.
Well,
Sometimes
isn't it then also, it's, the onus is on the city administrator to say, look, Mayor, I need your help here. I need you to get on the phone with so-and-so from the county or so-and-so from Caltrans or so-and-so from VTA. I need you to throw your weight out there and advocate for us because this is what I'm trying to do and this is the roadblock I'm reaching. So it's a two-way thing. We want you to do this. Now, city administrator and staff go do it, but then we're here as your resources, right? So come back to us when you need us. Oh, you're on this one committee, you're on this committee with, whatever. We need you to push for this. I think it's kind of a conversation and a two-way street. I'm a little bit sensitive to those roles and those lines from just having been an executive director and dealing with a board of directors, right? And the board of directors that think they really know how we should be managing, they don't know all the nuances and it just drives you crazy type of thing. So it has to, but there were times when I needed to go to my board member and say, I need this from you because this is your area of expertise or you have leverage in this area or whatever. Is that kind of how it's supposed to work? Or?
That's a great teamwork approach that I would hope to be able to build and have that across the organization be the way that we approach things. I've already started the conversation, for example, on annexation of the sports complex, right? That's going to be an area where we're going to need all hands on deck and we're going to need conversations and weight of everybody making that happen. So there will be opportunities for sure where we're going to say, hey, please step in and help us with this. And I'd love to hear along the way of, hey, I think our council expectations are that we get this done and we're not seeing it happen so that I have an opportunity to address it.
Councilman Marchi.
Right. I think for the council, there are things that are real senses of urgency.
Yeah.
When you're saying about, well, we'll get it done, when you're giving your example, but, it might take some time. Like for LAFCO, okay, that is going to take time. It's a different type of urgency. I'm like Terrence and Zach. I hate seeing the weeds growing in the medians. I hate seeing the litter. I hate that because, we hear at our council meetings, about economic development and bringing businesses in, which is going to bring more sales tax in, which allows us to buy more stuff and to expand our services. But if I was a person wanting to invest in Gilroy or any city, I would look at the aesthetics. Is this a clean city? Is it attractable to other people to come here and spend time downtown? Why are people not walking our downtown? Why are people not eating in the restaurants? There are reasons. And if there's something that we can do to say, no, the trash has to be cleaned up. You need to do this, this, and this. I don't want, as a council person, to sit and say, yeah, 6-7 months down the line, we'll get to it. It's like, no, you need to get to it now because we need the economic factor to come into play here. So That's where some of us are coming from. You know, some projects just, we have to do it now. Others, it takes time to build and come up with a plan.
To Greg's point, you know, in where the lines are on and how much involved we are or not involved, and historically, you know, my personal involvement that I'm sure many people sitting over there know, it largely comes from not understanding what you said you want to put in place, which is what is the SLA? What is the expectation? Okay, so if to further that point, in terms of getting involved into some of those things, I am a representative of 60,000 people who all are sometimes, many of them are thinking the same things when they go by, right? Why isn't this, or why isn't that? And so if I drive by a sofa on the corner and it's sitting on the corner in plain view, especially in an area where city workers probably are driving by from time to time, and I drive by 3 days later, my question in my mind, and many residents' mind, is why hasn't that sofa on the corner been picked up? And if the SLA is we pick up sofas in 7 days, okay, well, okay, it's in 7 days. And on the 8th day, I look and the sofa's still there. I go, okay, the sofa has been picked up, but 7 days was that? We really should have some conversations about some of these things, and now we can tweak those in the way that we want. If I drive down Santa Teresa right now, there's 3.5-foot high weeds that, you know, should, you know, by this time we already have the big tractor thing that sticks the arm out and like that, and then one day it's gone. I don't know, because I don't know what the expectations are. And then that leads me to be involved more, because I immediately think it's not being hit, because how could it possibly be? So that's going to help out a lot, and then we can just try to keep improving, and I don't want to be involved in any of that. I want to be completely out of all of that. But I am a representative for all of these people who see the same things.
So that begs the question, then, if there is an SLA questioned by any of us, in the weeds in the median is something easy that we can keep focusing on. If there is an SLA about that, that would be directed right to.
Or department head.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because I'll echo, I love the idea. If there's an expectation, it's so much easier if there's an expectation. And I see what your point is when you keep asking for the dates, because then that puts you at ease, because it hasn't reached the agreed upon expectation. But if it's unknown, that's where it gets uneasy.
I mean, so back to this is a partnership. And so, yes, you guys can be great assets and allies to Matt and his team. You know, the more you kind of understand, not getting in the weeds, but understanding how it works and what the service level standards are, so that you can communicate that. And if they're not being met, you ought to know why they're not being met and how can we meet them.
So just another question about Thursday and expectations. Will we have an opportunity to discuss the potential of a study session for the unhoused, and then also an opportunity to discuss the potential for quarterly or whatever meetings where we can just get together as council members and have a dialogue of what is going on? I just, you know, it's a new environment for me. I am, you know, I'm a collaborator by nature, and hey, you're looking at something, how can I participate? How can I support? How can I help? But, you know, given the Brown Act and stuff like that, oftentimes we can't have these conversations because we've already had conversations with a couple others. And so I just would like to, and so in that way, it kind of feels secretive to me. So I'd like to know, hey, what's going on? Oh, man, you guys are on that? That's awesome. That's great. You need any help? No? Great, fine. I'm so glad it's being addressed. But, hey, something that hasn't been addressed, none of us have talked about, maybe we should, you know, we just want to have these conversations. So I'd like to see if Thursday we can talk about creating those.
So I think I have other plans for Thursday for what we're going to talk about, but your point taken. A couple of things came up today. One is we need a study session on housing and unhoused. So we'll look for an opportunity to make that happen. I think it makes sense for us to talk about the legislative agenda and the work program on a routine basis. And I'm thinking right now that maybe 3 times a year is probably a good cycle. 4 times seems like a little heavy. 3 times is probably a good amount of time, and that may be too much as well, given that it'll happen in the budget process as well. So we'll look for opportunities to bring back a conversation, sort of an abbreviated version of what we did this morning. With here's the legislative agenda and the work program, and here are some highlights. And then you'll have it ahead of time, so you'll be able to ask questions about other items should they be of interest to you. And then to sort of assuage a little bit of the angst that I'm probably going to get from my team. The conversation on deliverables, it's and what, for instance, our SLA is, are all going to be great. Having goals and targets are going to be great. I'm an advocate of setting them at a level where you have to reach for them, right? So that it's not going to be 100%. And then we'll have a conversation about what we need to do to get to 100%. And some of that is going to be balanced with how we are resourced, right? So we have 5 streets workers. So how do we allocate them on a daily basis, and what makes sense? How do we assign work on a daily basis so that they're the most productive, right? So if they need to spend 2 weeks doing weeds, then they can't do anything else for those 2 weeks, right? So it's hyper focused on something. It leaves us with some gaps in other areas, but it's the most productive way of getting the work done. So, and it's a hypothetical, right? But just to carry the point. So we'll have that conversation when we bring the SLAs back for conversation, that there's limitations in what we can do, and we want to hear what your expectations are, what we think the best practices are, and then what we think we can achieve. And just know that we'll talk about it when we hit 50% on a particular item. We come back and talk to you about it. It's an opportunity for discussion, right? It's not going to be. I'm not going to put it as. I mean, obviously, our departments are going to look at it and say, "Hey, how can we improve this number with our resources that we have now?" That's going to be part of the conversation. But it's also going to be, "Hey, we've done everything we can do on this one. We got no more overtime to throw it at. We've got no more staff to throw at it. If we want to get to 60%, here's what it's going to look like." And we'll have that conversation. We'll have that amongst all the other things that we need to do. Usually that happens in the budget process, so we may have to align some of it with that, but it doesn't preclude us from having the conversation along the way of why we're tracking the way we are, and you can ask the questions that we need to ask to dig in on those things.
I just want one more comment, and I just want to say, a lot of what we have been dealing with, and credit to the council, since I have been elected, that's our 3rd city manager, right? I mean, we have had a lot of. Oh, that's right, Harshal. I'm so sorry. It wasn't you that I forgot. It was somebody else. But there's been it's been very choppy, if you will, and so I think that I would like to extend a little bit of a grace period to see how Matt does. And kind of back off, let him do his job, and then, next week, then we can jump back in or whatever. But I mean, I just would like to advocate that I'll give you a little more, 8 days. But kind of then start, chipping away if we are not seeing kind of the things that are pet peeves in our brain. That's what I like that. Let him do his thing.
All right, I think we got what we need for today. Great job. Nice meeting you all. I'll turn it back to you, Mayor, to adjourn the meeting, or?
Meeting adjourned. 12:02. Plenty of time for Kelly to get to her meeting.